Microphone, please.
Jeff.
Good afternoon, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Education and Learning Committee. This meeting is being live streamed and will be made available on the Council website for public viewing. Could I remind members to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off their video when you're not addressing the meeting. Should you wish to contribute to any item, you should write "Speak" in the Teams chat function, and you will be invited to speak in order about new issues. Should your question or issue be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so we deal with the business as efficiently as possible. The usual standing orders apply, including any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time, or you could write "Leave" in the Teams chat function and then join. This will allow us to monitor member presence. Could the clerk provide Sedrington apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. We've got 21 members present, 10 members present in Council HQ, and that's the Chair, the Vice Chair, Councillor Ian Crothers, Councillor Karen Crothers, Councillor McKee, Councillor Scobie, Councillor Stitt, Councillor Thompson, and Finlay Anderson, our Youth Council representative, and Ellie McConaughey, our Youth Council rep. We've got 11 members present on Teams, and I've got 2 apologies, one from Julie Irvin and one from Sam Scobie. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, just to say I'm going to have to leave at 3, the back of 3. I've got an appointment, so.
Okay, thank you. So I'll give my approval to members' remote participation. I'm also delighted to welcome Finlay Anderson and Ellie McConaughey, our MSYPs, who are here at our meeting today for the first time, as well as Reagan Jackson, who's here as support. This was agreed by full council on the 16th of December 2021 to invite 2 youth council representatives to join this committee, and I understand it was a very closely fought contest in order to get onto the committee. So welcome. I hope you enjoy the committee. Okay, so Gillian and Ros and I thought it would be useful to give a short COVID statement. Obviously, numbers are very high again, so just to bring members up to date in a general statement. We know how challenging the last 2 years have been for all, so the education team and wider council want our pupils to be in classrooms and learn again wherever possible. Although mitigations are being removed, this is against the background of a significant number of positive COVID-19 cases within our staff and pupils. The Director wrote out to parents last week to note that there may be occasions in the run-up to Easter that as a direct result of staff unavailability, we may have to ask individual classes or year groups to move to remote learning for a very short time. We're only asking pupils to do this if the situation is unavoidable because of staff absences and be for as short a time as possible. To make sure exam preparation is not impacted, the senior phase pupils have been prioritised for face-to-face teaching. Once again, thank you to parents, pupils and staff for your continued support and understanding with this difficult but temporary situation impacting on some schools. We all hope that we can all return to normal teaching and learning soon. Gillian, is there anything you want to add?
Nothing specific, Chair, just to echo our thanks for the pupils, parents and staff forbearance. It's difficult with such high absences, but we are confident that after Easter that we'll be returning to more normal face-to-face teaching and learning.
And I've got Councillor Hagman. Katie, you want to speak? Oh no, I see it's on item. It's on item 2.
Chair. Yes, it was item 2, so I wasn't sure if you were going straight into the committee or not.
Okay, so that's declarations of interest.
Yep. Do you want me to go just now? Or
yes, please, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yes, it was just in regards to item 12, just to declare that one of the organisations in Appendix 3, the Dumfries and Galloway Youth Orchestra, I am a trustee of. The Youth Orchestra isn't receiving any funding and it's not even forming part of the report, but it's just to have that noted on the agenda. Thanks.
Do we have any other declarations of interest? No, I'm not seeing any. So if we move on to item 3 on page 11, minutes of the previous meeting, 1st of February 2022, and this is for approval. Members happy to approve the minutes? Thank you. So item 4 Gretna Primary School, options to consider following role projections against capacity. So this is page 17. The elected members will have received an email from one of the local members, Archie Dryborough, giving some background to conversations he's had with the parents and the school itself, and I'll call Karen in. But I think because the appointed members haven't had it or didn't receive a copy of that, I'll read it out so you actually know where we're coming from in terms of that, and I'll encourage Karen to make a contribution afterwards. So it reads, members, you will be asked to make a decision on the temporary classrooms that have been agreed to build at Gretna Primary School at the above item on Thursday's meeting. Whilst I have no issue with the data that you will be shown, I do have an issue with the recommendation that you have been asked to consider. At the moment, Gretna Primary has 298 children on the books for the next session at Gretna Primary. However, what it does not show is the amount of ASN children in the school and the places where mental health support is given in the school. After discussions with staff and families, I am firmly of the belief that temporary accommodation should be built now, rather than having to wait with a watching brief. My concerns I have already written to the director. The funding is available now for these to be built. The head or deputy head is using a cupboard as an office at the moment, which is not good for having discussions with parents. The extra 2 rooms would be up and running when Cunningham's build their new 92 home development on Mackey's Field. Plus we will see 200 new private homes built on the old golf course. To suggest waiting before this happens, I believe, is not the correct thing to do. I would seek your support in agreeing the recommendation of 3.4.1 of the report, which is continued as agreed on 13th of May 2021 with the installation of a double classroom solution to increase the capacity of the school to 368, which I believe will be met when the new houses are built in Gretna. Also, if this is not moved forward from May 2021, how quick would it be to build the new classrooms if any other recommendation was accepted? Karen, is there anything you want to add?
Hi, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, obviously I've received that email from Archie as well, which I was quite taken aback because we only had a meeting last week, I'm sure it was last week, that with Lauren Foss, who brought us up to speed with everything, and all 3 of us were in agreement with the fact of 3.4.2 because that's what the data and the whole exercise had brought us to this position, that actually the school rule hadn't risen as much as what we had actually expected, but to keep the project in the background, that if it does escalate, actually one of the things that we were told was because the school rule has actually fallen, we've now got a free classroom and we've went from 12 to 11 teachers. So if the school rule rose rapidly, then we could get the free classroom up and running very quickly with the porta cabins coming in shortly after that. So I am quite concerned that I've not received this information. I'm not sure whether Gillian's aware, but I think that, you know, there's comment made that the ASN children, that mental health's been carried out in the corridor, and I think that really, I don't know if you can tell us what the numbers are, Gillian. I did try to contact the school. Unfortunately, they've not got back to me. I would have went down and visited for myself because I believe that if this is a problem, then we need to carry out a similar exercise to what we've already done, that we can identify what it is, because putting in 2 classrooms, if we fill that then with a problem that's just arose, then what do we do if the school roll goes up? We're going to be in a deeper problem because we've got the 2 spare porta cabins. So I think there's a lot of homework and exercise to do to establish exactly what the problem is, to make sure whatever remedy we need, it is the right remedy. But Gillian, I don't know if you can tell me how many ESN children, how often this is happening. Thank you.
Jane?
Thank you, Chair. And I'll hand over to Lauren in a moment. In that since we received the email, then we've also done made further inquiries with the head teacher and school management team and the ASL team to establish whether this is regular or one-off use of the space. Clearly we're in members' hands this afternoon in terms of our due diligence as officers in bringing together recommendations for the class basis, but if there is space required in the school, then we're happy to take direction on that. Lauren, are you able to give more detail in relation to Councillor Carruthers' request?
Thank you, Gillian. I think the only information that I'm able to add to that statement is that there is no dedicated learning centre provision within Gretna. So any ASN provision that's required is effectively within the mainstream provision. So it will be ad hoc, it will be a minor level. Should it be anything more significant, then they would be located within a learning centre establishment. I think what's also worth mentioning in the discussions is the numbers in the committee paper refer to 298 as the school's capacity, the school's role in next academic year. Actually looking at the numbers again in the last week, the role has dropped by 3, so it's down to 295. So that's again something that's worth considering in the discussions. I think there was a question in the statement read out around how long would it take to locate the 2 Portakabin classrooms, should we press the button on that. All of the proprietary work has been done, all the design is detailed out. There's a framework available for us to use to be able to locate those spaces there. There's no straight answer in terms of exactly how long it would take, because actually it's down to my ability. But realistically, you could be looking between 4 to 6 months potentially to be able to have something on site that's there to be used for capacity or any other reasons.
Thanks, Lauren. Okay, I'll throw it open. Karen?
Thank you. Just if Lauren can answer, was I right when we had our meeting for you to give us this feedback that we've freed up a classroom because the school role has dropped?
That's absolutely correct, yes. Previously, we've been working at 12 classes across the school, so now that's down to 11. That means there's a classroom freed up within the school itself. That becomes a second general purpose classroom. So the pressure from pupil support within a corridor should diminish. There's a classroom available to do that from. I think it's also worth mentioning that the head teacher's reference to working from a cupboard. Now that, to a degree, was choice at school, local level, because there was a probationer located at the school to allow release more management time. Therefore, management required more space. So John dutifully gave his head teacher's office over to the 2 deputies and decided, with them being down to 11 classrooms and no probationer placed there just now, that pressure on management time or management space is reduced also.
Thank you. Okay, so I've got Richard Brodie looking to speak. Richard?
Thanks, Chair. It was concerning to read the letter because of the effects on support for learning children with learning needs and obviously the head teacher. But I think that's been explained away. If the support for learning assistants or teachers have access to this extra classroom, that would certainly do in the meantime. Obviously, we're only projecting. We can only project forward a year, but maybe we should look at the next 5 years and our projections and come up with that. So I'm quite happy with the recommendations as it is. How long will it take us to get to a stage where we can just press the button as soon as as we know the role is going to escalate?
Okay, Richard. Members?
In terms of timescales, we can press the button. Sorry, thank you. In terms of times, all of the documentation, all of the detail of the design planning is at a position now where it's sitting ready, waiting to be issued. As soon as that happens, which could be tomorrow, we're just into a contractual arrangement with a framework provider to provide those facilities. And realistically, that could be anything between sort of 4 and 6 months before we would have something on site. In terms of the role projections, we do look beyond next year's enrolment. It's always a little bit of guesswork in there, because what we don't know is how many children that are nursery age will actually choose to enrol in the school. I think what we can see from the numbers that we have is that we have a big P7 class of 48 going out at the top end of the school. Next year, the P6 is a big number as well, it's 47. So if the enrolments stay as they've been this year, with a P1 of 36 coming in, it's likely that we'll see a decreasing roll. Now, what that doesn't do is account for any extra children moving into the catchment area through the housing development and housing growth. But I think, given the numbers had been up at 304, then 307 through last academic year, and we're below that at this stage, I think there's a level of comfort and should we need to grow the capacity of the school, we have the comfort of the 12th classroom that we could use in the short term, and that would allow us the breathing space for the 2 additional classrooms to be the button pressed and procured.
Okay.
Just come back on that, Chair.
Yep. Is that Dick?
Yeah, just I think if we can react within 6 months, I think that'll be sufficient. I think to meet any increase in the school roll.
I've got John Young. John?
Thanks, Chair. You opened the meeting with an informative update on COVID. I'm of my mind that we should provide Gretna with space and ventilation if we possibly can, and this space will probably be needed as well for its expansion if the number of new houses are as you reported. So I'd actually support moving as quickly as we can to build these additional two classrooms. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, John. Karen?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, at the moment, the numbers don't support it, but as Lauren's already said, we're ready to act on it very quickly if need be. My concern is the information that Councillor Driver has brought up, and I would like some sort of exercise that we've already done. I don't know if we can do some sort of suitability study, but I think that we need to go back and do... This exercise was about the classroom availability and the school role, and it's come up now that it's evidence that that's not needed at this time. I think that if there is an issue, there's no data behind the information. I think if there is an issue, we need to look at that, we need to get the data, and we need to make sure whatever solution is required is the right solution. And as I say, going back to, we put 2 porta cabins in at the moment, they're filled with other things, then the school roll goes up. Where do we go from there? Because we've not planned for that. So I think we need to initially find out exactly this other information, what it is, how often it's happening, and the 12th classroom that is now free, how's that being utilised? If it's not, why? So I think there's a lot of questions to be asked, but I think what we're being asked today is on the school roll, and it's evidence that the numbers aren't there. I think it's a different issue what we're talking, and I certainly am keen to have, I don't know, Gillian, if there can be something put in place ASAP where we look into that, because as I say, neither myself nor Councillor Tate have received any of this information, and it's quite difficult in that point to work on.
Willie?
Yeah, Chair, we've had information provided from Archie that Karen's quite rightly saying she didn't know anything about it. So there may be a bit of conflict there in terms of the information, perhaps not conflict in terms of what Karen's saying if we were to be provided with information. When does this decision need to be taken, whether we build or not build currently? And I think we've got to take cognizance of the fact that there's new houses being built there. It may not be known how many children would come along, but it's generally that younger people come in and then they want to look at the school. So in that respect, could I just ask when this decision needs to be taken and it was deferred, what the impact of that would be?
Gillian or Lauren?
I think our recommendation as officers was that we would look at as recommendation 3.4.2, so that there was a watching brief, so that we're keeping an eye on it. But in terms of, it would depend on when you would be looking for it to start. So as Lauren has highlighted, it takes 6 months. So depending on when we would wish the additional provision to start, we would count 6 months back from that. But Lauren is the technical expert in these matters. Can you give me any further detail, Lauren?
Lauren?
Thanks, Gillian. Thank you, Chair. It's exactly that. Attached as the appendix is a flow chart which takes us through a cycle of looking to see what the annual enrolment looks like. Should those numbers indicate that we require the extra capacity at that point, as officers, we've been given the permission to locate the temporary accommodation at that stage. I think the hard thing is if the accommodation requirement comes around mid-academic year, and so the recommendation 3.4.2 gives us that flexibility to keep an eye on what the role's doing. Should it go above the capacity or project above the capacity at that stage, we'd be able to press the button and not wait till the next enrolment period. So I think that gives us the flexibility, or as much flexibility as we can get within the timescales that we've got.
Thanks,
Chair,
Niall.
could I come back? I don't think I was given the answer in terms of what impact it would have in... Sorry, can you not hear me? Aye, no, I don't think I got the answer there in terms of what impact this would have if it was to be deferred. But I have picked up on what both have said, both the director have said, and I see no reason why it couldn't be deferred for the earliest possibility to come to a decision, and it wouldn't hinder the work still to go on in terms of making provision if it's required, because we've got two information. I think Carl's asking for more information, and I think it's only right that that should come forward to the committee.
Ian?
Thank you, Chair. I'm enjoying this debate. Apologies, I missed your proposal at the beginning. I just got tail end of it, so I'd be interested to hear just what you were saying in regards to why we should implement this now than before, because the information in front of us, the report, going back to, I suppose, a competency thing in real terms is that, OK, we've got this information in front of us. I haven't seen Archie's email at all or any of that information, but I've heard today some of the stuff that's been said in regards to potential stress, ASN, head teacher accommodation, such like at Gretna Primary School. But I think for us to move forward today and make a decision, it wouldn't be the most competent thing for us to do. If we're looking at future-proofing all the needs, whether it's for the school role to go up in Gretna or the additional support needs, how that's accommodated, or future office accommodations, I haven't got that information in front of us, in which I think Archie's put forward his email and you've put forward a recommendation just to push the button now, put the Port of Calms in place and move forward. So I'd be keen to support what Councillor Scobie is saying there. Is this the right time? I don't think it's the right time to make a decision on the implementation of, if I'm taking up, right, if I'm taking in consideration correct what you've said at the beginning, that we just go with this now. I think it's the wrong time. We need to have further information, as outlined by Willie, in particular Karen, when it comes to making this decision today.
Willie?
Yeah, Chair, I'm not speaking against Archie, because, in terms of 3.4.1, and if there's a need to build that, then we should be building and making that provision. So in respect, it's the information that we've got before us. So in a procedural motion, I would ask that it be deferred and that be taken first before we come back to the substantive issue.
Okay, Dick?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I agree with Councillor Scobie and Carruthers. I think Councillor Young brought up an important point about ventilation. Perhaps we should, I don't know if we've got a report back in ventilation in our schools, but I think to build 2 classrooms for ventilation, I think would be, at this stage, wouldn't solve the problem, because there'd be 3 classrooms empty in Gretna instead of 1, because it wouldn't have the teachers to fill those classrooms. So I think that deferring it and keeping a close eye on it, I think that's the best way forward.
Okay. Got nobody else, so I'll throw my pen. No, John?
I'll ask the daft boy question, Chair, if you didn't mind. A roll of 298. Now, there's no guarantee that that's split evenly through the classes, but if you divide that by 7, it comes out at 27 in each classroom. What's the capacity of what's the numbers that should be in each class? The maximum numbers. There's nothing to tell us what the maximum numbers are, and whether there's actually enough classrooms for what the kids that's there at the present moment.
Lauren, do you have any information?
Thank you, Chair. It's a very good question, and there's a range. Primary 1 classes are a maximum of 25. A composite class is a maximum of 25, so anything that's a P1, 2 or a 3, 4 or a 1, 2, 3, 4 are always 25. P2, 3 and 4 are a maximum size of 30, and then the remaining classes are 33s. So there's a complex mapping of the size of the physical rooms and the number of children that could fit within them, and that's where the capacity of the 308 is arrived at. We work with the staffing team, we work with the enrolment side of things to look at what those class compositions would be. With the numbers and ages and stage of the children that are at the school, we've got that to a point where 11 classes fit within the school with the right number of children in the classrooms without breaching any GTC registration or indeed our own local 2 metres square per child policy.
Thanks, Mark.
That's fine, thank you.
Karen?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry for coming back in. I just want to make it clear it was myself that actually met with Gillian about 3 years ago along with the Community Council to drive this exercise forward. We identified at that point that there was 720 plus units identified in the local development plan, and our fears were that we were going to get to the point where the school was spilling over, so it was, and we didn't have an alternative, we didn't have a backup plan. So this has been an absolutely excellent, worthwhile exercise. I think it's been really good, and we've got a backup plan if we need it. I do think now we do need to look at something else. I mean, the stuff that Archie's brought, I mean, I would be very, very keen for a suitability study. I don't know what it's called, but something like that we go into the school and we actually do identify, and if these needs are required, we look at the proper solution for them needs. But just like what we've done here, we've got the data to back up, and I think that's what I would really be interested in. I mean, I'm extremely passionate about Gretna Primary School, and I want it to be fit for purpose for all children and for the teachers. So I just think we need to do that bit of exercise. I don't know, Gillian, if that can be done or and what kind of timeline, so as we can get the data.
Thank you. And absolutely, that this exercise, as you highlight, was done on pupil role and planning in terms of expansion of pupil role. However, we did not include the additional support for learning, as Lauren highlighted. We don't have a learning centre, and we have, as you know, an increasing number of young people with increasingly complex needs, and certainly that was not taken account of in this piece of work. So if there was further information that we could bring to make sure that the spaces that we had in Gretna were appropriately utilised, because one member mentioned the fact that these 2 spaces with porta cabins don't come with teachers, they are simply spaces, and therefore we would need to ensure that they would be appropriate spaces for, if it is additional support for learning or management accommodation. Classrooms are not necessarily the best accommodation for that. So if members were minded to go with the recommendation today, and we would then go back to look at the additional support for learning provision and how the spaces are being utilised, and bring back any further information to guide our planning.
Just a second, Councillor Scobie's motion.
I think it's undoubtedly true that these spaces are going to be needed in the future when we look at the projected number of houses being built there. I think since the money is already being granted, the space is needed. By having these additional classrooms there, we would be able to reconfigure the school to give the most appropriate support for the youngsters and the staff. So I would move 3.4.1 that we move with the installation of the double classroom as of now. We're coming up to an election. Sorry.
Just on the point of order, I asked it to be a procedural motion. I'm not against what you're saying or what Archie's saying. It's to get the fullest information. It's a procedural motion. And then if that's not accepted, we can then move on to the substantive issues that's before us in the recommendation. So we need advice for governance in terms of it being the procedural motion being taken first, and then we can move on to the substantive issues.
Sorry? What is your procedural motion?
Procedural motion is to defer the report for further information on the information that Archie has provided and Karen has sought. So that, me as a member, I'm able to look at it and see. So that's the procedural motion that I'm asking that it be deferred.
Thanks, Chair. So yeah, the advice would be that we would have a procedural motion on Willie's motion to defer, and we would need somebody to propose that we don't defer, that we consider it today. That would be the procedural, if somebody proposes an amendment to that.
In that case, I would move that we don't defer. We make a decision now.
Do we have a
Chair. Second that.
Sorry, Leader, was that you coming in to second?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a motion proposed by Councillor Scobie, seconded by Councillor Crothers, and that's to defer consideration of this item today and for further information to be brought back, and that's in light of the information that was made available today from Archie, from Councillor Drybra, and also the additional support for learning information that's been sought from Councillor Crothers to come back. And the amendment is to consider the item today without a deferral. So, Chairman?
Amendment.
Vice Chair?
Sorry, apologies.
Speak button,
Amendment.
Councillor Brodie?
Motion.
Councillor Karen Crothers?
Motion.
Councillor Ian Crothers?
Motion.
Councillor Dempster?
Amendment.
Councillor Drysdale?
Motion.
Councillor Fairbairn?
Motion.
Councillor Giusti? Councillor Giusti? I'll come back to Councillor Giusti. Councillor Hagman?
Amendment, please.
Councillor Inglis?
Motion.
Councillor Little?
Amendment.
Councillor McGregor?
Motion.
Councillor McCammon?
Motion, please.
Councillor McKee?
Amendment, sorry.
Councillor Murray?
Amendment.
Councillor Scobie?
Motion.
Councillor Stitt?
Amendment.
Sorry, Councillor Stitt.
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson?
Amendment.
Councillor Young?
Amendment.
And I've got Councillor Giusti in the chat proposed the motion. We've got 10 votes to 10 votes. So, Chair, would you like to use your casting vote?
Amendment.
That means we will proceed and determine the item today.
In that case, can I move that we go with 3.4.1?
Up to second, Chair.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any amendments coming forward. So can we move to the recommendations? I think we've noted the information within section 3.1 to 3.3 around the current enrolment information. And 2.2, can we agree the option for managing the current and future capacity requirements will be option 3.4.1? Councillor Brodie?
Oh.
Councillor Brodie, are you with us?
Yeah.
Dick, do you want to use the chat function? Okay. Shall we move on? Okay, so moving on to item 5 on page 23, Dumfries Learning Town Phase 2 update. This report gives an update of progress on this project, including site of the first school community newsletters at Appendix 1, the appointment of Ryder Architecture Limited as the design team, and the indicative programme timeline for the refurbishment of Dumfries Academy and Lawburn Primary School. And Lauren, is there anything you want to add to your paper?
Thank you, Chair. If I may, just to inform members that the Appendix 1 and the copy of the newsletter has actually seen an upgrade to a digital version with some embedded video clip within it. So that will get shared around members after the committee meeting. We've also gone the same direction for the Dumfries Academy and Lawburn newspaper update, so they'll be shared with members after the committee today. Thank you, Chair.
So all 3 of those will be shared with members, yep. Okay, thank you. So I've got Tracy, wanting to speak, Tracy Little.
Thank you, Chair. It's just with regards to page 27, 3.3.1. At the bottom of that paragraph, it says Ryder Architecture have commenced a series of consultation workshops, which includes extending invitations to community sports partners at the David Keswick Centre. And it was just to ask that we if we can have concrete assurance that these partners will be updated and informed as a priority. As you know, we have recognised high achieving disability athletes that use David Keswick Centre, and they have facilities in place there that are not available anywhere else. So they will need advance notice of any change of their circumstances. So to keep those partners, those groups from David Keswick Centre in the loop and so they're updated as a priority, please.
Lauren?
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. We had our first engagement session with the wider community groups last week. There was actually, if I'm honest, not a huge representation across all of the different community groups, and that's something that we were very conscious of. We've gone back with the Greystone Foundation to say, can we get a wider gathering here of all the different user groups within the facilities? At this stage, it's very much about what the future looks like around trying to grab all the knowledge, information around what spaces need to do and how they need to work, what they need to deliver for every single user. But as we progress through the process and we get a bit more clarity on what the end solution looks like, that will give us the opportunity to measure the impact against the existing facility and how that works as we transition into the new. So very keen to ensure that we have all of these connections in place all the way through the whole process. So it is very much aware of this position and where we need to get it to.
Okay with that, Tracy?
Yes, that's great. Thanks, Lauren.
Okay. So I'm not seeing any other members wanting to speak on this. Oh, Stephen Thompson.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was just on a similar point, but it was just, I think we looked, when we saw this last time at committee, we had a sort of timeline as per the sort of chart that's shown there for the construction, etc., the sort of project management chart, and it had a wee line in it about demolition. But just for the avoidance of any doubt, what's the earliest that the athletics track could be put out of commission? I mean, obviously we don't know yet until the details are clear, but what would be the earliest that could potentially be put out of commission? Thank you.
Lauren?
We're looking at a Q2 2024 construction start. So really that would be the earliest. However, there's a lot of water to go into the bridge, and I would say this stage we're very early in the options appraisal side of things. We're clear that the site allows us the scope and ability to, if for example the running track was not going to stay in that location, to relocate it or create a new one in a different space. We're trying as best as we absolutely can to ensure that we do not remove any facility there. So, we're trying to protect the existing running track through the design process. And if that does end up deemed to be the best location to put the school, then realistically we'd be looking to recreate that running track and the external sports facilities in a different location before that was removed from it. But I think the strategic support services are due for completion at the end of May. So at that stage, we'll have a master plan and a site options diagram which shows us the locations for the key parts. So the running track, the 3G and the school. So that'll give us that detail at that stage.
Okay, thank you. And if it is going to be displaced in 2024, presumably we'd have to work backwards from that to have something in place ready for 2024 when it might be getting demolished or built upon.
Or more likely, the first part of the works in the second quarter 24 be the relocation of the running track. But either way, we're looking to protect a running track in the current location or in a future location, so there's always one available.
Okay, thanks for that assurance.
Okay. Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, Chair. I was wondering, under page 25, 3.2.1, is there clarification whether the title of curricular flexibility, which is listed under as a consideration of influential factors, is includes the possibility of future disruptions to learners? Thanks.
Lauren?
Thank you. The reference to curricular flexibility is something that is factored into determining capacity and size requirements for schools. So, for example, I'm very conscious that we have a Dumfries Learning Town aspiration, and that's partly been delivered already through the projects that we've got in place, but also through the networking. And really it's around, we need to create spaces that can deliver a wider curricular opportunities, and sometimes that's about the space, sometimes that's about the joined up thinking of a common timetable or a common 7-period week. So for example, if you look across Dumfries just now, there's actually 90 choices a senior pupil can make around what curricular pathways they want to follow. So really, that's what this is around. To answer the question around disruption, though, that's something that's very high profile, high priority in terms of how we deliver this. We need to ensure that the minimum impact is felt from all of the pupils at the high school during the construction phase. It is a tandem build, so we will not be touching the existing building until the new one is finished. I think that the story that I hope to get out of this at the very end, our children saw great advantagement of being in the existing building while the new one was being built, because they had the opportunity to interact with all the different trades, interact with all the different specialisms that were taking place there, and take opportunity from it, rather than it being a noisy distraction of something going on in the background. We need to get the youngsters involved with the architects, involved with the bricklayers, the plumbers, the electricians, the master planners, so that we take advantage of the unique opportunity that we've got through the investment that's happening.
Okay, Finlay.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
So I'm not seeing anybody else wanting to speak. So can we move to the recommendation? Can we note 2.1, note 2.2, note 2.3, agree 2.4 that to progress the relocation of Lawburn Primary as a priority, And can we, 2.5, agree that a LEIP Phase 3 fund bid be explored with officers of the Scottish Government? Sorry, can I just go back to 2.4? See, I've been given some advice from procurement, whereas it says agree that to progress, it should actually read note that to progress, because it has to go through the correct procurement process. Okay? So going back to 2.5, agree that LEIP Phase 3 bid be explored with officials of Scottish Government when details are announced, and a paper brought to this committee as set out in 3.7. And can we note 2.6, the progress of the cessation of the Bridge Educational Trust as set out in section 3.8.1. Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you. So moving on to item 6 on page 35, which is the Properties, Buildings, Schools Asset Class Update. This report shows the net spend position for December 2020-2021, the projected variances and reasons for slippage, and the position on Lorrinow and Noble Hill Primary Schools, which members will recall were part of the original DLT Phase 2 bid, which was then subsequently modified on cost basis. Okay, so Lauren, it's you again. Do you have anything to add to your report?
Thank you, Chair. No, nothing further to add, but happy to answer any questions.
Members, with my usual reminder that if any members want to bring up schools within their particular ward, specific schools, then they can do so with the officers out with the meeting. We have a very long agenda, and I don't think we want to prolong it with individual schools. Okay? So, anybody want to speak? No. In that case, can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1, the net spend position to December 2020-2021, and 2.2, the project variances and the reasons for slippage, and 2.3, the update position on Lorrinow Primary School and Noble Hill Primary School. Okay, thank you, members. So moving on to item 7 on page 43, which is Lawburn Primary School. The consultation process for this project was impacted by COVID-19, and we have been asked to agree a revised statutory consultation timeline. And once again, Lauren, do you have anything to add to your report?
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, just to say that it's an update on the key dates within the timeline. There's nothing else that has changed in there. It's just to reflect the position that we're in just now. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, members? No, it's very much a procedural paper, so can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1, the impact? Oh, sorry. Elaine, followed by Katie. Elaine?
Yes, Chair, I appreciate this is a procedural paper, but as Lauren is well aware, parents of pupils at Lorrburn Primary School are very concerned about the state of the school, and also feel that the timeline has been pushed back and back and back, and partly because we had to change the DLT2 proposals because there was insufficient funding to be able to do what the council originally wanted to do. But just really a plea that if there are any ways in which we are able to accelerate the programme for Lorrburn Primary School, that those are taken and fully explored. And indeed, if we can accelerate this in any way that we do that. Now, obviously, I know that I'm not going to be around to see that happening particularly, but I know that the parents of the pupils and indeed the teachers of teachers at that school, which really is not fit for purpose. It's not an educational establishment as a building that we would wish to see in the 21st century. I mean, good teaching and learning goes on there because of the hard work of teachers, but it's certainly a far from ideal building to be teaching young people in. So just to get your assurance that if there are any ways that we can accelerate this programme, that those will be fully explored and taken if possible.
Lauren?
And mirror everything the emphasis behind making sure that we do this as quickly and as efficiently as we can. I think one of the key things that the members have just taken a decision on in the DLT2 paper is the use of Hub Southwest. That gives us the ability to move at a much quicker pace than we would normally through the council's own routes. It's pre-procured processes that we will flood with external personnel to be able to build the master planning up and really hit the ground running, so that the schools themselves will feel a real emphasis in the coming weeks, months around that engagement process and starting to look at what the solutions may well look like. So I absolutely hear you loud and clear, and it's something that we need to ensure that we take the journey with us.
Okay with that, Elaine?
Yes, thanks. Just to get that assurance, and then parents will hope for that in the future. And I don't think anybody will be letting us off the hook on this one. So,
Katie?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Lauren, for the report. I appreciate it's relatively procedure, but forgive me because I've not been in education for the last couple of years, so this is my return. You'll be maybe pleased to know that it is a one-off. However, my question is around about the sort of consultation. I appreciate that there's statutory guidance that we have to follow, but how does that fit in terms of our own consultation mandates, etc.? And I'm sort of drawing on my experience from other directorates where when we're going out to consult, there's generally a consultation mandate with lead officer appointed, a community engagement officer appointed. Do we follow a similar process within education, or is it completely a statutory process that we then don't follow our own D&G consultation policies? Thank you.
Lauren?
I suppose the easy answer is this is a statutory compliance process detailed by the Scottish Government, so we're legally bound to follow this to the letter of the law. If we deviate from any of the timescales or the processes, then theoretically the relocation process would fail. So we don't follow council's in-house procedures for consultation and engagement. However, I think the process is a very robust one that leaves no stone unturned, looks at every single detail. And the key part, which I think is really important, is the educational benefit statement. It delves really deeply into the benefits, if you like, of what we're proposing, and has to prove one way or another that the benefits to the school community are far greater in the proposal, i.e. moving to Minerva, than staying where they are. It's also something that Education Scotland at a national level review and give their comments and thoughts on as well. So it's a very robust process that, whilst it's not council policy or procedure, it is one that we're legally bound to follow.
Okay, Katie?
Yep, that's great. Thanks, Lauren.
Okay, so I'm not seeing anybody else, so can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1, the impact of COVID-19 on the statutory consultation process? And 2.2, agree the revised statutory consultation timeline in the appendix. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 8 on page 47, Educational Attainment Academic Session 2020-2021. This report provides members with a summary of pupil outcomes from Curriculum for Excellence and Senior Phase National Assessments during academic session 2020-2021. The report is provided following members' requests for further information from Area Committee. Members are asked to review educational attainment information from session 2020-2021 as set out in Appendix 1 and note the actions being taken to support pupils to prepare for the 2022 exam diet. And we have Alistair Young to speak to the paper, and I think Gwyneth Fairbairn as well. Is there anything you want to add to the paper, Alistair?
Thank you, Chair. Not at this moment. We're happy to take any questions or comments on the paper. Thank you.
So, Willie?
Yeah, Chair, I'm looking at this and then I'm relating it to item 10 on the agenda, and I'm looking at my time, so I don't know if we're going to get to there before I have to leave. But I welcome item 10, but it's how we apply that to item 8 and the achievements that are recorded here. I'm looking at page 61 in terms of the percentage of kids, pupils who fall within SIMD and the way that we've been in years gone by and how we seem to be slipping back on literacy and numeracy. And I think in 3.3.3 was quite an interesting comment here. Overall, children and young people across Dumfries and Galloway prefer better in listening and talking at all levels than reading and writing. And it's just that appliance. And again, I come back to an issue I've raised in this chamber at Education Committee in terms of additional support for learners, the ASNs, ASLs and so forth, and how we bring this up. And looking at item 10 perhaps gives us that opportunity to see, you know, a new strategy, how we move on these, how we record, how we look at that in terms of achievements and everything else. So it's really just an overall in terms of how do we get these achievements much greater, particularly in SIMD areas, you know, in bringing them up to an achievable level so that the kids can reach their maximum potential. Again, coming back to getting it right for every child. Because this does not give good reading and made worse by the lockdowns and COVID.
Alison?
Absolutely, I agree with Councillor Scobie's observations. What I would say to try to offer committee encouragement is that there is a lot of work going on in the background to just do exactly as Councillor Scobie described there, to look in detail at how we can best support all the young people throughout the whole system, but particularly those young people in that bottom 20%, that the first quintile there. And there's a lot going on, particularly in the areas of how Pupil Equity Fund is being used. That is being looked at in detail by head teachers, by central team members, and we're working in cooperation with our SWEC partners, partners from Education Scotland, our local Education Scotland attainment advisor, to work with head teachers and schools to look at how can we really burrow into that and look at the detail of the data that we have got, see what is it telling us, what are we able to do about that, and how are we able to show a sustained commitment to actually making sure that we bring forward the improvement that we all wish to see. I think that Councillor Scobie is also correct in saying that the impact of the lockdown and the periods when a number of young people were out of school, I think that really shows us the impact, the positive impact that being in school and having that nurturing environment and that wraparound support that we are able to provide in schools, early learning, childcare settings is so vital to the development of the young people. And it's clear that ground has been lost during the lockdown and the impact of the pandemic. But we are really working full on to do everything that we can to try to bring forward the improvement as quickly as we possibly can. And we're doing that in a targeted way to make sure that we are meeting the needs of all learners throughout the whole system. And when there's a particular focus on the improvement of literacy, numeracy, health and well-being, and we are looking at that and looking at the quintiles in there as well to try to ensure that we're maximising the progress that we can make.
Willie?
Yeah, just as I say, I have no doubt there's a tremendous amount of work, and I hear when you go along to parent councils what they're doing with their PEF funding and how innovative that head teachers are and schools are with their PEF funding. But again, it's just relating item 8 to item 10. how do we record, you know, the progress that's being made with children who need that additional support, and that we're keeping those records up to date, and parents can see, and it's in item 10, that there's engagement with parents, that parents can see that we're making progress with their child or children in terms of the attainment or achievements in what their children are doing. Are we up to speed with that in terms of all schools across the estate, both in secondary and primary, in terms of the kids reaching their maximum potential, how we record and see that progress is being made?
Yeah. Can I come back and answer that, Chair? What Councillor Scobie is saying is absolutely vital, and it's part of what we would say the triangle of the learner, the teacher and the parent. That relationship between the three is absolutely vital to ensuring that communication is there. And that the level of that communication changes and it increases depending on the level of need that the young person might have. So it may be the case that for some young people, conversations at parents' evenings, at drop-in sessions are the way that would be communicated. But in other cases where there's maybe higher levels of need, there would be planned meetings taking place, whether it would be IEP meetings where IEP plans are being updated, and it would be really effective practice for parents to be involved in that, so that they're aware of what are the long-term targets for the young people, what are the short-term targets, and the parents are fully involved in creating that, along with the education professionals and the partners that would be working with the young people. The same would be true if young people with a coordinated support plan. So there is a moving level of engagement that would happen there, depending on what the relationship needed to be and the needs of the young people. And in terms of recording needs, all schools should be using the CMIS recording system to be documenting and recording any additional support needs that young people would have. And that information then is able to be shared and can, particularly if young people transfer from one school to another. And when they transfer from primary to secondary, the information is there, and any plans or information in relation to that young person can be uploaded into that and then be shared appropriately with the people who need to know that. So those mechanisms are embedded throughout the system, and I think that maybe it would be useful if elected members would be interested in it. We could put forward an elected member seminar where we would be able to explain in a wee bit more detail what some of those processes look like, to be able to offer the assurances that the elected members are looking for in terms of how that's recorded and how we go about ensuring that there is rigour in that.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, the elected members seminar, but obviously, given where we are with the elections, that would be for the new council rather than for the council which is standing down as of May the 6th. So yeah, certainly something which would be useful, I think. Okay, so I've got a number of speakers indicating they want to contribute. So I've got Tracy Little, followed by Finlay Anderson, followed by Ellie McConaughey and Katie Hagman. So Tracy.
Thank you, Chair. Alistair, I've got 3 wee questions, call them wee questions. Do you want me to just say them all at once or just one at a time?
Whatever suits you.
All right. Okay. First of all, past results. How do we compare nationally? Can we have a breakdown by school? We used to get a breakdown by school and we're not getting that anymore. So I'd like to see that, even if it was something that went to area committees. Rather than this committee here, but a breakdown of schools individually would be really helpful.
We should be able to do that, Councillor Little, when at area committee we could do that breakdown by school level, but we had to wait until the insight results are published in February before we would be able to give it in that detail, but we should be able to provide that at area committee.
That's great. And as I said, how do we compare nationally? How do these past figures compare nationally? And also, our percentage of school leavers in positive destinations. How are we successfully measuring these? I mean, do we do follow-up, which I'm hoping we do? And if we do, how long do we do follow-up? Because it's all very well young people leaving, going to be going to higher education or jobs, but then maybe that doesn't quite work out. And, you know, I would like to think that we're able to catch up with them to still help them, and not just once they've left the school building, then it's cheerio.
Absolutely. Well, the first part of your question is how are we doing nationally? The statistics there that show that we're doing favourably in relation to our comparators, and in most measures you can't quote them off directly. They're in the report, but in terms of where we are nationally, I think that we are doing well in relation to what our results are looking like. I think that in senior phase results there that are in the report, it's important to note, though, that the differences in how results have been captured and gained through SQA in 2021, 2020, and what they were like in 2019. So I think that that's something just to bear in mind when comparing if we're not really comparing like with like over the 3 years. But if you look at our results in comparison to national results, I think Dumfries and Galloway is holding its own, and I think we're doing more than holding our own with comparator schools over a significant number of the measures that are recorded from Insight. On your other question about follow-up, we've been working really hard with our partners from SDS to look at making sure that we are reducing the amount and the number of unknowns in the system. And we have gone from being below the national average for that to being considerably above the national average for making sure that we are understanding a much smaller number of unknown pupils. In fact, I think the last data that we had, we only had 1 or 2 pupils that we're still tracking to see what they went on to after they had left. And in terms of that follow-up, we work very closely with SDS and the Young Persons Guarantee and with our partners in employability and skills to do just exactly what you've described there, to make sure that when a young person leaves, it's not just, close the door and that is them, that we are working closely with our partners to make sure that even if a young person goes on to a positive sustained destination when they leave school, what does that look like 6 months on or a year on? And we get that information from our colleagues in SDS and are able to look at that jointly to see what we can all do to try to make sure that we are maximising the number of young people that are able to go on to positive and sustained destinations.
Thanks, Answer. Okay, with that, Tracy. Sorry.
Yes, that's great. Thanks very much, Alistair, for that detailed response. It's given me some reassurance, that's for sure. Thank you.
Finlay.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to comment that the appropriate data provided in Appendix 1, pages 55 and beyond, can be quite challenged to interpret both online and on the paperback copy due to the colours and shades being difficult to differentiate between. Are there any adjustments which could be made to this, please? Thanks.
Certainly, Finlay. I actually, being a person who suffers from colour blindness myself, I understand that there can sometimes be colour challenges in the way that we represent things. But that is certainly something that we will take on board. And when we are preparing our reports, we'll try to make sure that there is as much colour and tone contrast in any future reports so that that doesn't arise.
Okay, Finlay. Okay, Ellie.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to point out on page 48, section 3.5.2, this section's talking about subject availability, whether it be for college courses, advanced hires, or foundation apprenticeships. However, due to my own experience and the experience of many other young people in Dumfries and Galloway, I can say that this isn't always the case, and that it can be really difficult to make sure that all of the subjects that you want to do are available to you. And even though some of them can be, it can be difficult to get them all on a timetable that'll suit you. So I just wanted to ask if there could be anything more done about this.
That is a really good question, and one that we are working on in a lot of detail at the moment. We have our senior phase strategy, and that senior phase strategy, one of the things that is central to that is the desire and the predisposition to increase the number of courses, the potential for accreditation, and even courses where it's modules and not SCQF accreditation. And we're trying to increase that all the way through Dumfries and Galloway. We're working very closely with our partners in the South West Education Improvement Collaborative through the South West Connects network to put together opportunities for young people to engage in, advanced hires, and that then potentially, if that's able to be done through the network and from South West Connects, that potentially frees up staff in schools to be able to look at how they can extend and widen their curricular provision to look at other areas. And we really are thinking carefully about how we make sure that we improve access of young people, no matter where they are geographically in Dumfries and Galloway, to be able to access a number of courses. And one of the few positives that's come out of the lockdowns in the pandemic is the increase in digital usage. And there has been a lot of expertise developed now in being able to produce digital courses. We have eSchool, and we've got South West Connects. We've got partnerships with Glasgow Caledonian University. We've also got our collaboration between schools as well, where courses can be offered. Like, for example, in Dumfries Borough, there's partnerships of schools where they're able to offer a course, and young people can go from one school to another to be able to participate in that course. It's an area that we really hope to develop. Particularly, we want to ensure that we develop courses that have got inclusion right in the centre of it, that we provide a range of courses, and we work with our partners to provide courses that are going to be courses that will attract everybody, that it's not just about more hires or more advanced hires, that we are looking at lots of vocational courses. And an example of that I would put forward is the increase in the range and variety of courses that we've been able to provide in collaboration with the college, particularly over in the West, in Stranraer, where there's been a significant expansion this year in the courses that are available. And we're currently working with the college on looking at the foundation apprenticeships that we provide, and we've got good working relationships there, and we hope that we'll be able to expand that in the future too. One final thing on that is that we're talking with National Developing the Young Workforce people from Education Scotland, and how we can build digital networks across the country to provide either foundation apprenticeships or modules or national qualifications in a variety of different courses that really increase and expand that range. We, like you, don't want to have a situation where the geography of Dumfries and Galloway inhibits learners, inhibits young people's ambition. We want to let folk fly, and we want to do everything that we possibly can to provide them with as many opportunities to do that as possible.
Thanks, Alistair. Ellie, okay? So I've got Katie and then Kenny Pullen. So Katie.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. So I've got a couple of points I wanted to make. First of all, I want to thank Councillor Tracy Little for flagging the additional information, because I think it's really important that we have comparison, and certainly it's something that I've asked if we can get detail to area committee. So it's brilliant to get that confirmed with yourself, Alistair. I think it would be really important to maybe put that down as an additional recommendation, Chair, if you're happy to do that we agree that we get that detailed level to area committees. My point, or my second question, is it relates to actually the subject that you were just talking about there, and that is access to advanced hires and using the South West Connects hub. Now, I appreciate in the report before us at 3.5.4 on page 49, it references that this has been overwhelmingly supported from pupils and teachers, and that there is findings that have been reported to head teachers with evidence. Is that report able to be shared with members? And the reason why I ask is, while it's really welcome to receive this report, that's not necessarily the information that I'm being given as an elected member from parents on the ground. And one aspect of that is about being able to access these courses, especially when a teacher, for example, is not within the local authority area. So within the South West Connects Collaborative, if, for example, your teacher is within one of the Ayrshire schools, the fact that they have different holidays means that there may be weeks when our pupils are looking for teaching and there's no teacher there. And equally, when our pupils are on school holidays, the teachers perhaps in the Ayrshires are there, etc. So I think it would be really useful to see that evidence back. So if that can be shared with elected members, that would be really useful. And then the point above on 3.5.3, it does say that there's increased confidence of staff to consider and embrace virtual learning. Again, that's really great. But can I ask how that is gathered? Is that from staff surveys? Is that head teachers' reports? How are we gathering that information? Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Hagman. To answer the first part of your question in relation to where we are, how the differences between Dumfries and Galloway and our partners in the Ayrshires, there are inevitably going to be times when they're at work in Dumfries and Galloway is not, and vice versa, and that can provide some challenge. But the courses that are being run, because of the digital nature of them, that most of them are in the situation where work can be provided, and there is and then the young person would go away and do the work. So there is a degree of independent learning, particularly as you would expect that at a higher and advanced higher level. So there is that opportunity within the nature of the courses to be able to overcome that issue. In relation to how do we know, the feedback that we've got in terms of the pass rates of young people who've accessed those courses were looking really high. And we should be able to, I would need to check and see what in terms of, what the data situation, what we can and can't share, but in principle, we would have no problem with being able to share with you whatever we're able to, so that you're able to see how effective the courses have been, particularly South West Connects and in the eSchool work. We've been very encouraged by that, because we're finding that in almost all cases, it's high quality, experienced teachers that are delivering these courses, and the success rates have been very high.
The director's indicating she wants us to come in. Gillian.
Thank you very much. And just to support Alistair's response, and as the regional lead for the South West Educational Collaborative, I can confirm that we're happy to share that report. It's been shared with the Chief Executives, and if there are local issues that we need to take forward, we're really happy to hear that. It has been overwhelmingly positive for the young people that are studying on advanced higher, and a really good opportunity to rehearse what skills they will need in independent learning for when they move on to the next step in learning. These are SEQF level 7, which is equivalent to first year university. So having slight mismatches in holidays are things that we are well placed to overcome, but I'll certainly get that report to members. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. Okay, Katie.
Yeah, Chair, in response to my second question in regards to how are we evaluating our staff's confidence in virtual learning and virtual teaching, excuse me.
In response to that, Councillor Hagman, we are getting that information back via things like participation in our Excellence and Equity Teams spaces. We have got Teams groups set up for practitioners where they're able to share in the digital environment a variety of either, how they're getting on in their practice, is sharing effective practice, sharing resources and so on. So we're seeing a big uplift in that, and high numbers of people are participating in that. Also, is officers from my team, from Curriculum School Improvement Team, speak to head teachers. Head teachers are reporting back to us that they are seeing, they themselves and the practitioners in schools they're seeing an increase in the confidence of practitioners at all levels in the system, whether it be teaching staff, non-teaching staff, in how they are utilising, the digital landscape in that digital world. And I think another thing that we are seeing is we're looking at creative ways of how we are developing pedagogy, how we are developing effective learning and teaching through those digital environments. And increasingly, either ourselves at local authority level or in partnership with our South West Education Improvement Collaborative partners, we are providing and preparing professional learning sessions around a variety of different areas. For example, we are working with our QAMs, as our Quality Assurance and Moderation Support Officers, to look at how we are building skills amongst practitioners and amongst all our teaching staff in moderation activities. And we've got the moderation cycle and digital moderation approaches, and we are finding that these sessions are being, they've been well attended by QAMSOS, and they are also, the practitioners that are taking part in them are proving that, that's something that they are feeling increasingly comfortable with. So it's that intel coming through the system that we are actually getting to tell us that there is an increased confidence in that.
Okay, Katie?
Yep, that's great, thank you.
Okay, so I've got Kenny Pullen followed by Councillor Thompson. Kenny?
Thanks, Chair. Hi, Alistair. It was really just a comment, Alistair, rather than a question, just about, you're obviously asking members to note the actions being taken to support pupils to prepare for the 2022 SQA diet. Members will be aware, no doubt, that there's money there to support payment of staff at Easter School, but I just really wanted it noted that there's obviously a huge amount of hours being given over by teachers in secondary schools to supported study classes, which are unpaid and completely voluntary. So the number of teachers and the number of hours being offered before school, during lunchtimes and after school throughout the whole year, and for years and years gone by, obviously that's a big area that's going in to help our young people prepare for this year. So I just wanted to have that noted really more than anything else.
Thanks, Kenny. So, Stephen?
Thanks, Chair. It's got the sort of stacked chart in terms of different destinations for young people in different quintiles. This is to do with SIMD. And just listening to the discussion earlier, obviously a lot of these metrics here based around SIMD quintiles, for example, will show, there's quite clear differences in outcomes, if you like, for depending on which quintile you're in. And I'm just wondering again, in terms of the availability of courses across our region, there'll be certain things that lend themselves more to digital education, and there'll be certain courses that don't work so well. And obviously we'll have got a much better picture of where we need to target our energies to make sure that we've got that equity of geographical availability of certain subjects that don't maybe work so well digitally. And because the thing is that I also notice Leavers destination by type, there's a segment of our learners who, some of those subjects I would suspect would be those that people would then go on to study in further education rather than higher education, for example. So there might be a sort of segment of our learners who are sort of underserved maybe by digital learning and also by the geography. So we can't really get away from geography by its nature. So I'm just sort of thinking, where are the hotspots for you? I mean, there's quite a lot of positives here, which is good, and where we can take learnings from that. I'd be interested to know what are the subjects and where are the geographies where we're finding it hard to deliver for those learners who are in those segments, and particularly those quintiles, that might benefit the most from getting that addressed. Because with the best will in the world, we might want to do something as an authority, but there is that sort of rightful, if you like, autonomy from head teachers, where they might say, well, actually, for this particular locality, this is what we're able to do here, and how do we balance the two? So I'd be interested to hear a bit more about that. Thank you.
Absolutely, Councillor Thompson. I think that what you've just described there is something that is very much central to our thinking and how we take forward and further develop the senior phase strategy. We're also, as one of the items that will come up later on, we are looking at our framework for inclusion, and central to that is looking at some of the challenges and the issues that you have just described there. How do we ensure that equity of provision across the system for all young people? And you mentioned that, quintile 1 there at that lowest 20%, and there is a real challenge there of trying to make sure that we provide an education system and options and opportunities for those young people that are going to see them motivated and see them want to continue on in their learning. And for us, there are challenges there. There are geographical challenges. As we know, our region is one that has got significant rurality, and that can be a barrier to learning. So, and you're also correct in that for some young people, the digital aspects and the digital courses may not be something that particularly interests them. They may be more interested in, vocational courses, like hands-on courses. And that is why we are trying to continue to create linkage between ourselves and a variety of partners to provide those opportunities. I mentioned earlier on our foundation apprenticeships. We've currently got two. One is food and drink technologies, and the other one is creative and digital media. And we are working with the college and how we are providing those frameworks moving forward. But I also said there's a model there that, if working well, we could potentially look at how do we expand that provision, and also how do we provide NPAs and other levels of qualification that are coming in, not SCQF level 6s and 7s, but like much further down there. So we're looking at level 3s and level 4s and trying to make sure that there are curriculum pathways that suit all learners and all young people. And that there is nobody left out, that everybody would have options and opportunities. And working closely with our partners in SDS, we have detailed intel and information, just as you've described there, about the destinations that young people go to and from different schools. So we can look at each of our secondary schools, look at the destinations that young people go to, and then we can go back as part of our conversations with head teachers, when education officers are speaking to them, we can be saying that, how are you developing your curriculum and your curriculum offer to look at your particular demographic? How are you utilising the tools that are there at your disposal? For example, how are you utilising your developing the young workforce school coordinators? How are you linking in with regional DYW to get that intel and intelligence about what the labour market is and the skills shortages and the skills availability in different areas? And as we know, throughout our region, there are areas where there's agriculture, there's forestry, there's seafaring trades, there's all kinds of different things that are out there in the rural economy, as well as the service industries and the manufacturing and so on, that is available in some of our towns and our market towns. So part of our role is to look at how does our senior phase strategy, how does our framework for inclusion support that, and how are we having the conversations with head teachers to help them to open that up. And I mentioned earlier on in response to another question about if we potentially are able to utilise and use the digital networks to be able to provide some of the higher level SCQF courses, level 6s and level 7s, hires and advanced hires, that may have the added advantage that would potentially free up some degree of staffing, where schools could potentially look at, well, how do we then use that created or freed up staffing potential to be able to increase the spread of our curriculum and the spread of that offer to really be as inclusive as we possibly can be, and to make sure that we are offering courses and options for young people that they will be interested in and want to grasp onto and take forward. And all of that is hoped in the end will reduce the amount of young people that are not going on to positive or sustained destinations. And obviously we would follow that up in the ways that I mentioned when I responded to Councillor Little's query. I hope that is some way to answer.
Steve?
You've got 95% there, but yeah, so I think, no, that's very interesting and sort of provides a good deal of assurance. Obviously, there's a lot of intelligence there. I think just in terms of choice of school and the difference between schools, I would hazard a guess that the SIMD quintile would be a better predictor of positive destination than any particular choice of school, although that might be controversial amongst parental choice. But however, just in terms of working backwards from being able to link up with colleges, because obviously you don't want you want to have that from S2, S3, S4. Who's teaching forestry at that age? You have to bum about until you get to college. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's how do you work backwards from college, working with colleges when you might be wanting to do social care, forestry, food technology. You know, so how do we work back to ensure there's a clear pathway to that future provision where we know vocational courses could be picked up in other providers?
Yeah, I think how we do that is we look all the way through the broad general education phase, right from nursery all the way right up to the senior phase. We engage with things like My World of Work that are SDS produced aspects, and there's a profile that gets done in P7 and S3, and the profiles created there help young people to engage with all aspects of the world of work and employability. Curriculum for Excellence is running through it. There are strands, and as we know, one of the key pillars of what we're trying to achieve in Scottish education in general is the developing the young workforce and the importance of that, sitting alongside GIRFEC and Curriculum for Excellence. So the entitlements of the career education standard entitlements are something that run through all the way through the system. So these are aspects that in primary schools teachers and practitioners engage with to make sure that young people have got opportunities to engage with the world of work, so that they're seeing what kind of opportunities are available, not only in their own local area, but, you know, casting the net much wider. And I know that in my experience of seeing what's happening in schools, many schools are engaging and reaching out to amazing opportunities, you know, like renewables and robotics and all kinds of areas that young people are interested in. And that is, you know, like giving them that initial stimulus and impetus to potentially look at career pathways. And there's a wee aspect in My World of Work called Animal Me, where it's like the young people get the opportunity to compare themselves to an animal in terms of their characteristics, and then they look and say, well, these are characteristics, these are the things that you like, these are the things you're good at, what kind of jobs and career opportunities might you enjoy or might you consider marching into. So that's just some of the initial steps that kind of pave the way into that whole senior phase offer and what I've already described we're trying to achieve through the senior phase strategy.
Thanks very much for that. I'm glad we've got some representatives from the Youth Council, because they probably know a bit more about Animal Me. But I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else wanting to speak, so can we move to the recommendations? Can we agree we've reviewed the educational attainment information? And 2.2, note the action being taken to support pupils to prepare for the 2022 SQA diet. And then I think there were two additional recommendations. One is for a detailed breakdown on attainment for individual schools to go to area committees. And the second one is to hold a members' seminar once a new council's been formed. Okay, everybody happy with that? Okay, thanks, Alistair.
Thank you, Chair.
Moving on to agenda item 9, on page 73. Okay. This report provides members with a follow-up to the report which was brought to Education and Learning Committee in January 2021. This report summarises the current data in relation to looked after children within education, specific data related to the work of the care experienced education team, and describes proposals for the future work of the team. And I see we've got Jim Brown and Karen Bryden, is it? Yep. To speak to the report. Is there anything you wish to add to the report? Karen?
Thank you, Chair. No, there's nothing else to add.
Right. Okay, so I'll throw it open to members. Ros?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jim and Karen, for this report. And I have a comment, really, about the statistics contained in 3.9. I mean, I hugely welcome the development of this team, and it is absolutely a multi-agency approach that we need, and it's fantastic to see that set out in this paper. But we can't ignore the shocking statistic in 3.9 about the difference in the situation in Wigtown compared to other geographical areas, Wigtonshire. And I just would want to see, coming back into the future report in 6 months' time, what exactly is causing that, because it's not a unique geographical area in Dumfries and Galloway. There are other areas that are very, very similar. So really, I just want to be reassured that there's going to be a focus on this statistic. And the one that shocks me the most is looked after children at home pupils are missing 15% of their time in school. And it is specific to that area. So really, it's just reassurance that the report can unpick some of these issues, and this is a great opportunity to do that.
Karen?
Thank you, Chair. In response to comment to that, if we look at the attendance for the pupils in Wigtonshire, yes, they are sitting down at 72%, which is, as you say, it is the lowest out of the districts. So therefore, we will be targeting our support workers in that locality to offer the support that's needed to these young people and to their carers to ensure increased attendance.
Okay, Ros. I'm not seeing anybody else indicating they want to speak. Nope. So in that case, can we move to the... sorry?
Sorry, Chair. Can I come in?
Katie?
Sorry, Chair. I'm not fast enough typing today. I just wanted to echo Councillor Surtees in those concerns. I think it is really important. I just sort of asked for an additional recommendation in the previous item of a report going back to Area Committee. Can I just get assurance that we will get details of this coming to Area Committee, because that's the opportunity for all members within that locality to get this information, because I'm very much aware that if a member doesn't sit in the Education Committee, they may not have the opportunity to find out what's actually happening and what positive steps we are taking to try and combat this. So I wonder whether it would be appropriate to either have something at Area Committee or to reach out to local members to basically give them an update. Thank you.
Yep, I'm happy to provide that update to Area Committee.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Okay, so if we move to the recommendations, can we 2.1 note the ongoing work being done by the Care Experience Education team? And 2.2 note the key messages from the current data in relation to looked after children within education, how teams within education respond to the data. And 2.3 agree to receive a further report in October 2022 with the latest data report and update on the work of the Care Experience Education team. Members happy with that? Okay. So moving on to item 10 on page 93, supporting learners delivering transformation update. This report provides members with an update on the progress of supporting learners' transformational programme being undertaken locally as agreed at Education and Learning Committee on 7th of October 2021. And we have David Maxwell to speak to it. Hi David, is there anything you want to add to your report?
Afternoon, Chair. Being very much aware of time, I wasn't going to add anything, but actually I think it's just important just to highlight to members that although we're only getting to this item on the agenda now, we've probably actually mentioned it in several previous items. Thinking back about that enhanced provision of supporting learners when we talked about our buildings, there was lots of questions there about curriculum and the widening curriculum offer. We've mentioned PEF, we've mentioned Care Experience, and we very much mentioned attainment in previous committee reports this afternoon. And I think what this item does is hopefully pull some of that together into that plan that we have for developing that framework for inclusion, which covers all of those aspects and many more. So I'm quite happy to be here and take comment and answer any questions from members this afternoon.
Thanks, David. I've got a hand on the screen, but I can't see. Oh, so it's Robert McQuiston. Robert?
Yes, just I'm thinking about the two reports that we've just been looking at. I presume that some youngsters fall under the category of both areas, that i.e. the Care Experience team and also learning support staff. I'm just reflecting, does this require quite a close partnership between those two agencies? You don't want a pupil to fall between the two and not have a dialogue or a conversation about it. Obviously, the more agencies are involved, the more challenging that discussion becomes. But I'd be interested in what David thinks about that.
Thanks, Robert. It's a really interesting question. And of course, there are many children that fall into many categories. You know, it might be attainment, it might be pupil equity funding, it might be supporting learners, it might be looked after, as you say. You know, children are all very different and very unique. I guess I would point members to in the paper to paragraph 3.18. And I guess in that paragraph, what I've tried to do, originally this piece of work was called Transformation of Supporting Learners. And very much that niche group and that, you know, that side of the council, that side of our business, just looking at supporting learners. What the policy context asks us to do now, and that policy context I've explained in the paragraphs before 3.18, it asks us absolutely to look at all our learners. So this is no longer just about a review of supporting learners as a department and supporting learners, teachers and learning assistants. This is about asking ourselves as a service, are we being truly inclusive? Have we developed that framework for inclusion? And are we getting it right for all learners? So in answering your point, I guess it's making sure that no matter what category or what label children have, that we absolutely get it right for them. And this framework, hopefully that we will establish and we will work on and will develop, will absolutely we will be judged on, are we getting it right for more of our learners than perhaps some of the current data shows.
Yeah, thanks for that, David. I suppose my concern is the more agencies that are involved in a pupil's and a young person's welfare, the more information there is, and the more greater the need there is to have some coordination. I think Guffey called it a named teacher. There's got to be some overall perspective that keeps the thing together and information is not lost on that youngster's career. But thanks for your answer.
Thanks, Robert.
Okay. So I'm not seeing it. Oh, Ros?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, David, for this report. And I think you're right, we have covered a lot of the issues. But on page 94, 3.8, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, this is a huge piece of legislation that was passed a year ago. And I'm just wondering if we could at some point have an update on how that is going locally in Dumfries and Galloway and where we are with that piece of legislation.
Sally, Jim might be able to answer some of that in terms of the children's services work that's going around, taking place around that. I can provide some answer in terms of being lead for Learning for Sustainability, which is my next paper, Ross. But we have done quite a big piece of work asking schools to consider where they are currently with UNCRC and the rights respecting school status. That survey has gone out to all schools. All of our Dumfries and Galloway schools have responded to that. And as a local authority, we have an aspiration that all schools will start their rights respecting schools journey by August 24. And actually, almost all schools have said they're going to start it prior to that by August 23, which is great. And we will in the future be able to report back to this committee and to area committee on the level of participation within rights respecting schools. So we will be able to report back to you how many schools are at bronze status, silver status and gold status. And we're currently working with UNICEF to work on kind of what they're calling a service level agreement to support our schools on that journey to rights respecting schools. So we'll be able to come back, Rose, to future committees with much more detail on what that looks like across our school estate.
So, Katie?
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Thompson has been waiting to come in.
Stephen?
I thought I'd maybe overdone it the last time, for the last item. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's actually on the same point. It was actually just a finer point about, obviously, since that decision, by the Scottish Parliament, it's since had some legal challenge. So I think there is an element of, while I'm fully in support of what's going on here, we're in the kind of constitutional framework that means that we don't necessarily get to play with the ball the way we want to. So what's the update from that? Because I understand it's meant to come back to the Parliament to consider some of the changes that the Supreme Court in the UK decided to as a result of the challenge. So is there something there that we have to be mindful of as we sort of push ahead to sort of deliver our values?
Take that
Jim, yep.
question. Thank you, David. Chair, are you happy with me taking that question? Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Thompson. Yeah, just to reiterate what David said, it's now our agreement with the head teachers that this will be moved forward. And just on a really positive point, Petic Primary School are now our first gold rights respecting school in Dumfries and Galloway. So really setting the way forward. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the impact of more and more schools taking this forward. In answer to your specific question there, Councillor Thompson, on the one hand, we don't need to have the legislative backing in order to drive our own improvement within the Education Directorate to of the aspiration that all schools become rights respecting. I think that's something we can do in any event. And as a matter of interest, that piece of work, that availability from the UN was there prior to this desire for the Scottish Parliament to make it law. So we'll push forward on that regardless. It's an excellent piece of work and it really promotes the voice of the young people within education and also just that understanding of what our rights are. So I think we'll do that irrespective. In terms of your broader point, I think this was made by the previous questioner. What are we doing, Councillor Surtees? What are we doing as an authority? And the journey there has been that I have put together a member officer work, or initially an officer working group. All the services came together to look at, if you like, an audit, effectively, of where we are. It was then a decision that we would have an officer member working group, also involving the NHS and also involving young people from Youth Council, Youth Parliament. That then meant that we needed to have names of those people, so we had to wait for that election to pass. So at the moment, what we're doing is myself and Darren Thor, the Children's Services Manager, are very much looking outwards to find out best practice. We're looking at ways that we can work with all our service leads to make sure that our actions are UNCRC compliant, and then that member officer working group, in conjunction, like I say, with Youth Parliament and NHS, will be fully populated with the new council. So I hope that answers your question, Councillor Thompson.
I'll settle for that now, Jim, but thanks very much. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so I've got Katie wishing to speak, and I assume, Jim, well, you got to speak, please. That was what you wanted to say. So, Katie.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got the report in front of me, and there's lots for noting. Thank you, David, for pulling this together, because it is, clearly a huge amount of work, and certainly Jim's confirmed there that there will be inclusion of our Youth Council and youth members of Scottish Parliament that will be able to feed into this. I think that's really absolutely imperative. I'm looking at Appendix 1, and we've got the strands, key themes and the key messages, but what's missing from that, from my point of view, is who's taking this forward, who's feeding into this. And I appreciate much of what we're looking at today is for noting. 2.5 is to agree to receive further updates, and I would ask that when we get those further updates that we can see clearly who's going to be responsible for this and who can feed into which strands. I would just like a little bit of clarity, please, because I am looking at the recommendations, and I'm trying to work out 2.4 makes reference to the creation of the DG framework for numeracy and oversight group and the 7 identified strands. Now, I can see the detail on the 7 identified strands, but I can't see any reference to the numeracy oversight group. So is that maybe an error? Is that not part of the recommendation, or am I missing something? Because I'm struggling to find it in here.
No, Councillor Hagman, you're absolutely right. I think we have had an issue with version control at one stage. That is referring to our framework for inclusion, not our framework for numeracy. We do mention in the paper, I'm just looking for the paragraph number, we do mention creation of an oversight group on 3.21.
Okay. No, that.
So we have created a directorate oversight group who will look at our framework for inclusion and will be responsible for pulling all those 7 strands together. I will be leading on that piece of work with support from Jim and others on the call. So 3.21 asks you, gives you some information there on the framework for inclusion, not the framework for numeracy. That purely an editing issue, so apologies for that one. In terms of your question about who takes that work forward, the easiest answer to that is all of us, because this is a whole culture change and a whole directorate change and about inclusion at all levels. So this is about working with our learning assistants, with our teachers, with our support staff, our inclusion team, our people in buildings, our curriculum offer, our parents, our young people. This really is about everyone in the service, because it is that culture change piece of work about making sure that we are delivering inclusion in its widest sense. But in terms of who will be leading on it, that oversight group are currently meeting and identifying key leads for each of those strands. And those will be key leads who will be leading on each of those 7 strands, who I will meet with regularly. And each of those 7 strands will then develop its own plan that they will share with me, that I will coordinate. You will also see in the next paragraph that we have, or further down, we have just recently appointed principal teachers of inclusive practice. Those staff now know who they are. They've gone through interview process and we have now appointed those staff. So those staff will begin to work with us over the next few weeks, and they will very much take an operational role in leading much of this initial activity. So hopefully that provides you with enough detail at this stage, but we will come back to future committees with more of an update and more of a firm plan around those actions that we are taking forward with leads and with timescales.
That's great, thank you. If I may, Chair, just finally, I know on 3.2 2.4, there's reference to members about participating in this series of member briefings. I just want to confirm that that does include our youth members as well as, I don't really want to call myself senior or elderly, but yeah, just to ensure that that's all members and we're being inclusive of that term. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It will be all stakeholders that we'll work with, Katie. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I'm not seeing any more speakers indicating, so can we move to the recommendations? Can we 2.1 note the policy context of support for learning, all our children and all their potential, the promise and United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, as intimated in previous committee reports? Can we note 2.2 the refreshed and updated policy context? 2.3 the change in name of the transformation project? And 2.4, with the correction, note the creation of the DG framework for inclusion and the 7 identified strands of action planning. And 2.5, I think there needs to be a correction there. I'm just guessing is agree to receive further updates in respect of the DG framework for inclusion and participation in the series of members briefing, paragraph 3.24. I guess that was a switch between different versions and something.
Yeah, apologies, Chair, for that one. Yeah.
Okay, is everybody happy with that? Yeah. Okay, so thanks, David. I think you're the next one as well, aren't you?
I am. Yeah, I'll stay here.
Okay, so agenda item 11, climate change, learning for sustainability and outdoor learning. This report provides members with an update on the progress of learning for sustainability in support of the Council's climate emergency declaration. The report also provides an update on learning for sustainability developments since the June 2021 report. It's a very detailed, very interesting report. Is there anything you want to add to it, David?
No, thanks for that, Chair. I guess just to say apologies for the number of appendixes to this report, but it was felt we wanted to share with you just the level of work that's going on around sustainability, around outdoor learning and around climate change. Each of these areas is very important nationally, and we know from our staff and from our children and young people that there is a real interest in all three of these areas. So we wanted to take the opportunity this afternoon to highlight that work that we are delivering as a directorate, particularly around our key focus priority 2, about children and young people's best start in life, but equally that importance of our new council priority 5 about climate change and carbon neutral, because that really is where lots of this work sits as well. And we just wanted members to acknowledge and hear and see the work that has taken place across those areas over the last year. So I'm happy to take comment and answer any questions, Chair.
Thanks, David. Rose?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thank you, David. And I just wanted to acknowledge all the work that you've put in over the last year. And I'm really glad you included all the detail in the appendix, because that does reflect the incredible work that's gone on. I also wanted to acknowledge the fact that there's a team of expert people who are working in partnership with us with this agenda. And I wanted to acknowledge them as well. And in fact, what I would like to do, if this is okay, is to add a recommendation, which is that those people take part in a seminar for all members to take part in, because I think this is a culture change. It is the way forward. And I think that would sort of nail what we're trying to do as members as well as our partners. And along with that theme, I'd like to also include our youth representatives, because I think, you know, they're the people that are most important in taking this forward. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Rose. Katie?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, David. I think it's such a hugely important paper, this. I think it's got the ability to absolutely transform what we're doing here in Dumfries and Galloway. So I absolutely welcome it completely. I was really interested to see on page 140 the reference to ladders of youth participation. And certainly I'd be really interested to hear back in future from the Youth Council where they feel that they're sitting at, because obviously Number 8, youth-initiated leadership, I think, is something that we absolutely should be aspiring to, but we're not there at this point. I would say. I think it's also really important that we do acknowledge the issues of biodiversity, and that has been mentioned as part of our 12-step plan and in terms of our commitment to the climate emergency. And I really welcome the role of Sarah Farrell, who's mentioned on page 165 as our climate emergency officer. However, I want to maybe ask, how do we ensure that, you know, we do have adequate staff in order to get that supported work going forward, just because I'm conscious how many schools we have across our estate, and is it really realistic for one council officer to be the go-to for any aspects of biodiversity? You know, I'm just thinking if a school's looking to do any projects in terms of raising awareness, but also in terms of property management, you know, is that team buying into this? Because I think it's really important that they do. So where we are maybe developing playgrounds, etc., how are we ensuring that they are following this to the letter? Finally, I like the previous report, we're noting an awful lot of work that's been done, which is really welcomed, and we are agreeing to receive a further report on the progress of this. I wonder whether it would be appropriate that we get information on the suggested KPIs that are mentioned on page 156, because I think that gives us a really useful starting point, and they do form part of the report today. So I think it would be maybe useful for us to maybe get that within our business plans going forward to ensure that we can keep an eye on these. But, you know, just want to say thank you for all the work on this.
Thank you. I'll answer that first. That last one first of all. If you look in our Learning for Sustainability strategy, which is one of the appendices that you have there, we have in that document a list of the KPIs on page 34 of that document that we're going to take. Those will be incorporated into Pintana and into our business plan, so we will be able to report back to you on those, and we hope to be able to report back on those both at Dumfries and Galloway level, but also to be able to report back to you on those at area committee as well, because we know, Katie, that you're keen to have that detail at area level as well. So we are working on that. We're currently pulling together just the baseline, because we do not hold all of that data. Some of that data comes from partners such as Eco Schools, Rights Respecting Schools, Sustrands. So we're pulling together that baseline data from a range of partners so that we can initiate where that baseline is, and then we can report back to you in progress. So hopefully that's you know, a response around that one. But please do come back to me if you want a discussion about those KPIs, Katie, at any point. In terms of our work with Sarah Farrell, I guess, is one person enough? That's a question for others to answer above me in the directorate. But we do have really good links with Katie. We have a curriculum support officer who sits on the officers working group, and therefore has direct access to Sarah and other members of that officers working group. And that's where a lot of the joint working that I am reporting on is coming from. So we're working closely with people in waste services around the Recycling in Schools project. We're working closely with people in active travel about active travel and biking to school and walking to school. So Karen Crichton as curriculum support officer is the link into that network of people, Katie, and is very much taking forward that work. Sarah has also done some individual work with some of our schools. We offered 2 or 3 online sessions with Sarah, and a number of our schools bought into that in terms of time-wise, and Sarah was able to talk directly to children about her role and her role across the council in supporting that 12-point action plan. So is one person enough? I don't think I can answer that, but we are utilising that person as best we can and building that partnership and building those partnerships across the council to make sure sustainability is at the heart of curriculum in our schools, and also to make sure we meet those aspirations of being climate zero. So please, Katie, do come back. If that's not enough detail, come back and ask me something else.
Thanks, Dave.
That's great. Thank you very much,
Okay,
David.
Okay, so I've got no more speakers. So can we move to the recommendations on page 107? Can we note 2.1 to 2.6 en bloc? And can we, 2.7, agree to receive a further report on the progress of Learning for Sustainability Action Plan? And as suggested by the Vice Chair, can we agree a members' seminar once a new council's formed? Okay. Okay, thanks, David.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that takes us to item 12 on page 251. This is the development of the Dumfries and Galloway Children and Young People's Music Strategy, costings in relation to additional instrument provision. This report provides members with background information around curricular and extracurricular music provision. The report also provides members with an update on the current instrumental music service provision and seeks a decision on how members wish to proceed with regards to the possible further evolution and development of the IMS. And we have Jim Brown to speak to the report. Jim, is there anything you want to add?
Nothing to add, thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Jim. Members? Sorry, Katie.
Thank you, Chair. It's almost as if I'm making up for lost time for not being on education the last couple of years. But as I'm sure you can imagine, I've got lots of things that I would like to raise in regards to the musical instrumental service, and I will try and keep my comments succinct. I do have an additional recommendation that I would like to bring forward. However, just before I get to that point, I think it's very easy to say that we've not been adequately funded for this service and that we can't expand the provision because we've not been given the funding. However, I think it's absolutely imperative to make clear that historically we're in this situation because historic decisions have been made in the past regarding musical instrumental instruction. I only need to look at North Ayrshire to do a comparison. North Ayrshire have a similar budget to ourselves in terms of government revenue budgets coming in, and certainly when I look at 2020-2021, their provision of string instrumentalist lessons was sitting at 223 in comparison to our 20 in Dumfries and Galloway. And overall, they provided instrumental instruction for 744 children as opposed to 537. So trying to look at the historical basis. So I appreciate that the report before us makes reference to not receiving enough money from Scottish Government to fulfil the requirements. However, I think it is important to put on record that in part is due to historical decisions that we are trying to change. Now, I do really appreciate the fact that we are making those changes and that we are on a journey with this. I also completely accept that we're not going to be able to get to that end point straight away, as frustrating as it might be for members, including myself. We do have the shared action plan with our youth councils, and I'm really great that we've got our youth councillors in committee today. And part of that was for a fair approach to music tuition for young people across the region. I would like to draw members' attention to Appendix 4 on page 227. And Appendix 4, if I look at the high school provision, for example, shows quite a large inequity across the region. So if I take Annan Academy, for example, with pupils, has had a pupil roll of 936 at 2021 census. If I compare that to Stranraer Academy, which is 998, these are two high schools of similar size. Yet in 21-22, there was 59 pupils at Annan Academy versus 24 in Stranraer. And Annan Academy had actually increased their music provision from 42 up to 59, whereas Stranraer had gone from 45 down to 24. I don't know what the situation and why that's occurred, and I think that's something that we need to look into. Similarly, Lockerbie Academy versus the Douglas Ewart has gone from 53 to 55, an increase of 2, whereas the Douglas Ewart has gone from 31 down to 25. There is clearly not equity of service across the region. So while I welcome the equivalent of 2.25 full-time equivalents of instrumental instructors as the recommendation 2.3, I think it's absolutely imperative that this resource goes into the west of the region, because from the data that's presented in front of us today, there is no equity. I would also, and I will finish up on this, I want to reference the Education and Skills Committee report to Scottish Parliament in 2019. This was a cross-party committee, of which was led by both the SNP and Labour, and was input from Ross Greer of the Green Party, and we had our own MSP Oliver Mundell on that committee, and there was 28 recommendations of that committee. Now, I'm not going to read out all 28 because I appreciate there is time constraints. However, just to pull out a couple of quotes on here, one of those recommendations acknowledged that the education delivered by instrumental music tutors supports a core part of the curriculum, and the committee believes that instrumental music tutors should be considered as part of core education provision. It also went on to state that the committee believes that unless fundamental issues of the status of instrumental music tuition within the curriculum and associated teaching provision is addressed when it comes to be treating materially different from other subjects, it's absolutely imperative that we look at this and go forward. So, while we have got our recommendations before us to note the curriculum offer and to note the extra curriculum and wider curricular offer in music in 2.2, we've also got the recommendation 2.3 with the increase of 2.25 full-time equivalents. The recommendation is quite lengthy, and it goes on to say that we should consider potential further expansion of this service. I absolutely welcome that, and certainly would ask that we do include an additional recommendation that within 6 months we receive a further report of exactly how we do that and how we actually cost this for the future of the service. So I'll maybe, if other members want to come in and speak, I'll maybe type in an additional recommendation, but if I read it out, I would like to propose that we agree to receive a report within 6 months detailing a plan to further expand the service with long-term funding arrangements and equity of provision addressing concerns raised within Appendix 4 of the report. Thank you.
Okay. Jim?
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor, for those comments. And we've obviously talked previously about this, and I think in terms of the value that music adds to young people's experience, there is no question, and clearly we've had conversations where many elected members have come forward from all parties to recognise that. I think it's very heartening that you bring up the numbers from, was it North Lanarkshire? I've forgotten you mentioned, but that with the same money, they're teaching 744 youngsters, we're teaching 811. So actually we're teaching more youngsters this year with like-for-like budget. I appreciate that was our last year's number, but that's part of the issue, that we have significantly increased the numbers of young people taught by the same resource. So you can see that there's been real efforts to make sure that we are maximising the efficiencies within the system. I think clearly regarding comparisons between ourselves and other authorities, it's also exactly the point you made that we are, I think, the third largest geographical authority in Scotland. Someone can correct me on that, but I think something like that. And as a result of that, comparisons to much smaller geographical areas, albeit with similar numbers of young people and funding, are to some extent not relevant, because we have got additional challenges that we need to address. In terms of the geographical data, and I think I hope I've done everything that I've been asked for. I believe I have, but we can look at, for example, the change in 1 year in a single school. Now, I think the most obvious answer to why in a given school that has the same staff, the same rough pupil numbers, as to why there are more or fewer, it's because pupils have made choices in one direction or another. It won't be because necessarily, we can't guarantee it is because the provision hasn't been offered. That would need to be considered. So, for example, that Annan has gone from 44 to 59, I've forgotten the numbers you said there, doesn't necessarily indicate that's because additional provision was offered there that wasn't offered elsewhere. Almost certainly as a result of more young people choosing that subject area. And just as we have to with teachers. In terms of schools, we have to match the provision related to the need. And that relates to a previous comment about building a curriculum and then making sure we've got the people to deliver that curriculum in all our areas. So I think there are very significant themes developing around today's conversation. I think I'd be interested in the 2019 education paper. I'll look to that. In terms of the new report, though, Councillor Hagman, I'm not quite sure what you want there. In reality, I suppose what we're doing here is we are spending the money within education on a variety of things. So the money that's allocated towards the IMS is spent on IMS, and you can see the work I've done this last year in ensuring that money is spent well and it delivers well for our young people. In terms of additional money, well, that would then need to be allocated from elsewhere, either within education or out with education. And I think that's, in a sense, over to you to say, do you want to tell me where that money comes from, that I can then, for example, buy in 5 new music instructors, and what don't I then pay for within education so that money can be released? So I'm not quite clear on that 6 monthly report. I had felt that today was actually drawing a line under this, and that we were going to allocate the government funding to additionality. We can look at geographical equity within that, and I agree with your point there. We can certainly look at that in the first instance to make sure we've got equity, and by all means to look at instruments you've described there, if strings are an instrument that is less well provided for. But regarding the funding moving forward and how I bring a paper to you in 6 months' time to identify where the money comes from, I'm not quite sure I understand the detail of what you want within that paper.
Director.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I was only looking to come in to support Jim in this, and that perhaps it would be appropriate to suggest that the new council plan may be a vehicle towards this, that should, as the new council comes together, that it may be an area of priority within the new council plan, and then once the funding allocation from government regarding the policy intent of Scottish Government is clearer, then we would be able to wrap this up within recommendations that the new council would like to achieve and is funded. But completely take on board the points made by members, and I know that Jim and team are constantly looking to make the best use and the most efficient use to give pupils the most choice in instrumental instruction across the region.
Yeah, in terms of the council plan, I think that's a good recommendation. I know negotiations are still ongoing between the Scottish Government and COSLA in terms of future funding for music tuition, etc. And I think, this is going to be something. This is one of the problems in the run-up to elections. That we can make promises which we don't know how much it's going to cost us at the end of the day. Everybody wants to offer the earth, but it's a question of how you pay for it. So there are these ongoing negotiations in terms of free musical tuition. What does that actually mean, and where's the money come from? So if we incorporate that, or look towards the new council plan, by then we may have more indications in terms of what funding is going to come from the Scottish Government. And as the officers say, it depends on where you go, how much money you're going to put into musical tuition and where you take it from in order to increase the funding. So other members looking to speak. So,
Chair, can I come back on that point, because I was asked directly? Thank you. Yeah, Jim Brown, just to come back to Jim there, because he was asking directly what I was looking for. I've written my proposal in the Teams chat. So it's to agree to receive a report within 6 months detailing the plan to further expand the service as per recommendation 2.3. So just to expand on that, recommendation 2.3 says to consider potential further expansion of the service following completion of the current national review of future instrumental tuition, including the development of long-term funding arrangements ahead of budget setting discussions for 23-22. So my request is for a 6-monthly report, and the reason being that is that would only take us to September, and having been a budget lead for the administration, I know that I was working on the budget from September. So actually that's to coincide with the recommendation 2.3. And I would just reiterate once again the recommendations from Scottish Parliament that musical instrumental tuition is core curriculum. It's not a nice add-on. That is the recommendation from our Parliament that is being supported by MSPs and our YMSPs throughout the south of Scotland. Thank you.
Finlay, you want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to make a general comment that the expansion and assurance of the development of Dumfries and Galloway children and young people's music strategy, in my view, this works towards the Council's goal of being an inclusive council and increases the equality and potential opportunities for young people across the region. This is something that the Youth Council has previously consulted young people on, and this showed that their support across Dumfries and Galloway to expand the music service. There's been talk of this being improved for a number of years, and it's good to see that there's a plan in place for 23-24. However, other than expanding the service in the year ahead, are there any plans to make a change around the promotion and payments of it?
Jim?
Thank you for that question, Finlay. In terms of payments, I think that's very much, I suppose, linked to what we're hopefully going to come back to then, following what Councillor Hagman has said in terms of recommendation 2.3, that we will get greater clarity from Scottish Government saying what they A, require us to do, and B, perhaps what they might fund us to meet that requirement. So the principle has been there, Finlay, that there should be no charging, and that's what Scottish Government have put this money in to offset. And what's happened is, as a result of that, particularly in our area, demand has increased significantly, which is often understandable. And so now the monies given haven't met the increase in the need. And so I suppose we're all interested, in Councillor Hagman and myself are particularly interested, as others are, I'm sure, to see the response of Scottish Government to say, we've done this thing as part of our 100-day commitments. It's had a real impact on the ground. It's really seen huge interest as manifest by the increase in footfall. And certainly, I think government will be looking at it with great interest, thinking, well, how do we now double down on that commitment? How do we now follow through on that commitment? And I think that's what I'm going to then bring the report back in 6 months, when I know what that government funding will be and what that can then pay for in terms of local provision. But I certainly welcome the question. Many thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Ian?
Thank you, Chair. I think you covered quite a bit, actually, in your statement. What I was going to say, I suppose, just as far as what Councillor Hagman has proposed, we've just been through a budget process. It would have been better to have seen it in there. That would have been better. But ultimately, does the decision what we look to take today, does what Councillor Hagman's proposes as a way forward to see a report, a sustainable, I suppose, free-to-point service use of for music tuition, does that have a any financial implications as we go forward, and will it alter the decision that we're potentially looking to make today?
Thank you, Councillor Carruthers. I think the decision today is around the spend in terms of the money that's currently sitting with us, which was the government, in short, in brief, it was the government funding minus the amount that we were already committed because of folk who were already paying customers of us, if you like, who we were having to then not charge for. So the 2.25 FTE is what effectively that residual amount will pay for. You're absolutely right to say that, of course, is not a a recurring piece of funding. That's a one-off, and those additional staff will not therefore be in the system moving forward. And I suppose that's exactly why we're looking at indications from Scottish Government. And absolutely right, Councillor Crowther. Anyway, my understanding of it, we have no agreement to go beyond the current funding level within Education Directorate. So the whole conversation that we're having now is, will the funding from government or the indication of funding from government then meet the current shortfall moving forward? I think that's the question, isn't it? I don't think it, though. I don't think, in answer to your question, that should not then, I believe, prevent us from making the decision around 2.3, in that we can then allocate that funding against 2.25. So I don't think those two things necessarily are contradictory.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I think it would be problematic to put actually a fixed time scale on this, because we are still in negotiations with the Scottish Government in terms of this. So we don't know what resources are going to be made available either from the Scottish Government or from ourselves as a council as part of the budget process. So what I think we could do, or what I was suggesting we could do, is in recommendation 2.3, agree to utilise the additional Scottish Government funding referred to at section 4 to support an expansion of the musical instrument service by the equivalent of 2.25 full-time equivalent from the start of 2022-23 academic year, and to consider in a further report potential further expansions once the rest is as per when we know what funds are going to be available. So we aren't actually putting any time scale on this because we don't know. It's out of our hands effectively. I suppose within that further report we could also look at the regional arrangements. Jim?
Thank you, Chair. I think that's an excellent way of moving forward, because what we wanted to do firstly is to spend the money in the best way, which is as described in the report. And in doing so, it doesn't stop us from making different decisions down the line. But we want to spend that money this year, the year it's been allocated, on 2.25 additional instructors. And I'll certainly, Councillor Hagman, be discussing with Mel Henry the location of those additional instructors to make sure that the two things you've mentioned, A, the type of instrument, and B, the geographical equity, are addressed by the allocation of those 2.25 wherever possible. And then we can wait and see. And I will then bring in a subsequent report a summary of what government have said with additional funding commitments.
So, is everybody happy with that? As happy as we can be at this stage? Yeah.
Chair, can I come back in, please?
Katie?
Thank you. I appreciate, obviously, I have put forward a recommendation. Nobody seconded me on that, so that's the way it goes. However, I do think it's absolutely imperative that we do have information as to why the instrumental uptake has dropped so rapidly in the west of the region, and I would ask that that is made a priority piece of work. I would also reiterate that we're in this situation not because we've not necessarily been given enough money, but because of the historical decisions that we've made in the past. And just for clarity, it's North Ayrshire Council, not North Lanarkshire Council, that I was comparing to. And if you want to look at geographic areas, certainly you can look at Highlands and Islands. They are doing an absolute wonderful job of musical instrumental. So I don't think it's to do with geographical areas as such, but I appreciate I've put forward a recommendation. I've not got a seconder for that one. That's fine, but I do think we do need to absolutely address the inequity across the region. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think Jim's made the commitment that we will look in, or he and Mel will look into the reasons for the disparities. Okay, so I've got no one else looking to speak, so can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1, the curricular offering music, and note 2.2, the extracurricular and wider curricular offer in music, and 2.3, do you you want me to read it out in full, Tracy, so you can... I'll pass it to you later. Agree to utilise the additional Scottish Government funding referred to at Section 4 to support an expansion of the musical instruction service by the equivalent of 2.25 FTE from the start of 22-23 academic year, and to consider in a further report potential further expansion of the service following completion of the current national review of future instrumental music tuition, including the development of long-term funding arrangements ahead of budget setting discussions for 23-24. Okay? Everybody okay with that? Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Jim. So moving on to agenda item 13 on page 279. Investment in Schools Virtual Desktop Technology Update Report. This report provides members with progress on bandwidth updates, mobile learning network rollout, details of the number of devices in the schools, and we have Anne Harkness to speak to that. And is Graham online as well?
No, Chair, unfortunately.
Sorry, Anne, I can't hear you. Anne, can you hear us? No, we don't have any sound from you at this end.
Chair, I'd be happy to come in and answer the questions if you can hear me, if that's any help.
Jeff, can you use your mic, please?
The world's falling apart. Is there anything you want to add to the report, Anne? Susan?
Just to add that the mobile learning network has started to roll out into the secondary schools, and that initial phase of that, which will change the bring your own device infrastructure in the secondary schools with increased capacity in order to try and provide some solutions to some of the network issues we've been experiencing in schools over the last few months. And that rollout's actively happening as we speak. So that was really the only update.
So sorry, is it Finlay? Finlay, you wishing to speak? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. In section 3.9 on page 280, when it states the performance of these older devices will remain under review, how will their performance be assessed, and will there be a dedicated person for this? Thanks.
Thank you, Finlay. So they will be assessed ongoing. We are just about to ask for a health check of our school network in order to try and get to the absolute bottom of some of the network issues we're currently experiencing, which are very different on a school-by-school basis. So we're currently about to have a health check, and that will also inform us about which devices are going to need to be looked at in which order, Finlay. So that will give us a bit of a steer in terms of which ones need to be replaced and when. And then that will become an ongoing annual programme in order to try and make sure that our devices, which have become increasingly important as we move into a digital age, are up to date and fit for purpose in every school across the region.
Okay, Finlay.
Thank you. Could I also just ask, is there any consideration of this in in-school computer peripherals such as keyboard and mice? Because I know in my experience that there's a lack of keyboards in school, and pupils and teachers aren't able to access networks and the curriculum due to there not being these peripherals in place?
Yeah, thank you. So the report outlines a number of devices, additional devices that we're looking to put in place to bring a ratio to a 1:2 and a 1:3. At the point of deployment of those devices, we will also be looking to do a bit of a sweep of all schools end to end to make sure that the other equipment, the peripherals that you're referring to, keyboards and mice in particular, because we know that they can be easily damaged, to make sure that they are all working as they should and replace the ones that are not. So we'll pick that up as part of the implementation of the devices covered in this paper here today.
Okay, so I've got Jim Dempster and John Young. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of questions, and Susan sort of covered the first one. I suppose it's knowing the right question to ask to get the right answer. The bring your own devices. Some of the schools in my area, they're obviously not working yet. And in 3.2 it says there's equipment's covering 15 secondary schools. It doesn't say how many primary schools. And so far, there isn't an indication of when the rollout will be completed because there was a shortage of the appropriate equipment. So, in effect, we still don't have a completed programme. And yet, in 318, the paper's asking that we don't have only mere six monthly updates. And I think that's maybe no constructive, although there's a new council coming along and I appreciate that. But we need regular updates, and I think it would be helpful if every member of the Education Committee, or indeed every member, got an indication of when their schools were likely to be successful in upgrades, because potentially it could be another 6 months again, depending upon how soon the equipment becomes available. And I'd also like to tease out 310, which concerns me a wee bit, where it talks about where the funding for devices are coming from, pupil equity funding, parent fundraising, and wind farm monies. Now, devices for wind farm monies are only supposed to be in addition to what the Education Authority already provides. And yet the report seems to suggest that they'll all be rolled into the overall counting, if you want, for devices for individual schools. And that was the very thing I was keen to see avoided, because I think if the Education Department are providing one device per 1.2 pupils or 2 pupils or 3 pupils, that should be out with whatever the local community provide. It shouldn't be if they've provided 30, the overall needs 70, the Education Authority only delivers 40. That would, in my advice, that would, or my opinion, that would be absolutely wrong. We should be calculating what the school's entitled to receive from the Education Department, and whatever else is there is supplementary to that. So I'd be interested on how Susan Aran thinks that might work, and keen to see reports coming until the rollout's complete, because BYOD or BIOD, or whatever you call it, isn't working in the schools I'm familiar with, and there's no indication when that's likely to be. Sorry to bang on about the same thing, Susan, but
okay,
if you can help.
Yep, sure. So if I could deal with the bring your own device rollout first. All secondary schools will have their devices fitted before the holidays. So before the end of next week, every secondary school bring your own device will have been upgraded with additional capacity. The primary rollout of bring your own device, which is absolutely new to primaries, they've never had bring your own device before. And that bring your own device, which is the creation of the mobile learning network that we've been reporting on, that will start to happen after the Easter holidays in the primary. And we're currently working on what that programme looks like, and that's informed by the equipment arriving, because it's different sizes for different schools. So according to whatever equipment arrives, we're then building the plan around that. So that programme will be shared and can be shared at a future committee meeting in order to provide that assurance in terms of the equipment rollout. The comment in the report about the 6-monthly updates, it's more that we move to a 6-monthly update rather than an every committee update, because as the work that's happening now is, as you rightly note, is taking a bit longer to roll out. So coming to every single committee means that there's limited updates to share with members, but we absolutely would be committing to being at committee at least twice a year, at least every 6 months, to provide a full update on exactly what is happening. It's not about stopping reporting to members. And 3.10, this is the difficult one. I think historically when community monies were given to schools to purchase equipment, that equipment was very much kept separate and used in the way that you describe, absolutely additional to the resources that the authority provided. However, as a result of the move to Windows 10, we have adopted that equipment. Now, we never did that in the past. That was always absolutely down to the provider of that equipment to make sure it was upgraded, etc., and replaced if it was damaged. So what we've done as part of the current rollout is we've absolutely adopted that. It's important that every device in the school is working as it should be working, and it's kept up to date, it's patched and maintained, and the security is kept up to date as well, in order that our young people using our virtual environments are kept safe. So we took that decision to adopt all of those devices at the same time. And for that reason, because we are now responsible for the maintenance of them and they'll become part of the counting, we opted to count them in the figures. Now, if members don't agree that that should be the case, we can obviously take that back out and we can make sure that the funding is used to fill that, to make that backfill. I think the point on that one also that I would make is that when we get to one-to-one devices, why would we need extra devices in the school? If every child has their own device, which is where we're trying to get to, why would we need extra? So wouldn't we use those devices to augment the provision at the moment? So that was the thinking behind it, but I'm absolutely happy to be corrected by members if you feel that should be different.
If I can go back, Chair, just briefly.
Come in, Jim.
Thanks, Chair. The problem I have is that it would seem as if local wind farm money is now subsidising the council, and that's against the principle of the grant, because the grant is for something the council is not required to do. So if the council is funding one-to-one devices, then the school should really use that grant money or grant monies for other things. Okay. Because we're in breach of the condition of the grant money by giving it to the council to buy devices that they should buy in any case, or at least that you understand what the thing I'm trying to explain. I maybe no explain it very well, Susan, but no. Money should not be used, community money should not be used for the purposes of delivering what the council's obliged to do. And that suggests that's what's happening in 310. And the other thing is, I would like to know, and I'm sure others would like to know, when the schools in my ward, the primary schools, are all going to benefit. And if you say it's specialist equipment, then that's fine. But it must still be some indication of when that special equipment is arriving and when work's being done. I'm sure it'll not be like Santa Claus. I'm sure it'll not turn up one day at Christmas. So there must be advance notification of some kind of when work's being done. And it's something that, well, whoever the new councillors are, I would imagine we want the same information, because it might not be forthcoming in the next few weeks. But I think it's important to keep ward members up to date with what's happening in the schools, and maybe a longer discussion about community benefit money. But certainly I wouldn't want, as one of the organisations who funded some of the devices in the schools, be called to account because the money's been used in inverted commas inappropriately. And that is a position we could find ourselves in if grant money's being used for devices that the Education Department should be obliged to provide in line with every other school across the region. Sorry to bang on, Chairman. I'll leave it to you. I'll not come back with any proposals or any suggestions. You know my thoughts, and I'll leave it to you to decide how best to deal with that. Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Anne, and thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dempster. If I could just offer the reassurance that in this current tranche, we're not yet at one-to-one, so that problem is further down the road, if you like. In this current tranche of updates to 1 to 2 and 1 to 3, we will revise our figures to make sure that those devices are not included, because I certainly wouldn't want any school to be in breach of the grant conditions for any funding they've received. So I can give committee the assurance today that we will revise the workings around that.
That's brilliant, Susan. Thanks very much, and thanks, Chairman.
Okay, Jim. Councillor McKee, David?
Councillor Dempster, I hope you don't mind, but if the school has been given funding from wherever, whatever source, and they want to make best use of it, and I'm sure that's what they've done, I would tend not to agree with you. Sorry, Jim. I'm glad you're away at the other side of the tune.
Well, I think Susan can see clarification on what the situation is with regard to these. We aren't actually agreeing anything in terms of the number of devices per school, you know, just to note the current situation. So there's no... yeah. Okay, so I've got John Young and... So John Young first of all.
Thanks, Chair. We seem to have gone a wee bit off the agenda item there. A lot of what I was going to ask has been covered in Susan's responses to Finlay and to Jim. I got a very detailed report on how my local secondary school's network and virtual desktop and some items of software was responding, and I was quite shocked when I read the actual day-to-day experiences. And I know it's been rectified to a great extent, and I'd like to thank Susan and her colleagues for helping in that case. But I just wonder, is there not, as a ward member, I felt I didn't know how well my school's IT systems were performing. And I know it's improving all the time. We're getting new types of software in to speed things up. But is there no benchmarking or some other way of allowing us to see real progress being made? For instance, when a class of 20 students log on first thing on a Monday morning, how long does that process take out of a 50-minute period? You know, it'd be good if we were able to see some actual figures showing the efficiency or the problems caused in the school's network systems, and then we could map an improvement over time. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Young, and I certainly know of the report that you received, so I'm aware of the detail that you got. I think one of the challenges we've got at the moment, and the health check that I referred to with my answer to Finlay will address some of this. But one of the problems we've got at the moment is the inconsistency. So some mornings pupils can log in no problem at all in a matter of seconds, and we've got some data from some secondary schools across the region where they've done timings for us, and that's been verified by the class teacher to be correct. And other times when they log in, it can take minutes, and it can take up to 15 and 20 minutes. And that's absolutely unacceptable. But it seems to be not quite intermittent, but it's not consistent as to when it's happening. So that's the purpose of the health check that we're about to get run on our network in the schools, is to give us that benchmark data of exactly what is happening across the estate so that we can build on that and build from there. So that data will be available, and we can make sure that that's shared with ward members for their own schools.
Okay, John.
Yes, Susan. Yes, Chair, that's very reassuring. And I would also agree with Councillor Dempster to have perhaps reports at area committee rather than the full education committee on how awards schools are performing in this area. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, John. Ellie, you want to speak?
I had a comment to make just about the capacity thing that was going to be done before the holidays. I just want to say that I think it's a really good thing to do because there is quite a lot of issues. Like sometimes the internet will be working in maths, but then you go down to a different class and nothing's loading on your phone. And it's okay for people who have access to internet on their phones anyways, but people who are on contracts or people who don't have that kind of thing on their phone, it can make it really difficult to learn in classrooms. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you, Ellie. Yes, we agree that that's not appropriate, that pupils should need to use their own data to access the network. So that's why we've increased the capacity. So I'm glad that you approve. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's really good to have somebody who's actually using the system feeding into the the feedback effectively.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any more speak. Oh.
Thank you, Chair. I was like to ask a question as to how the 1-to-1 and 1-to-2 plan for devices will be measured, because even though it may appear that a student has their own device, the reality can often be that they're sharing this device with 2 or 3 siblings, with parents. How will this be measured?
So the 1-to-2 and the 1-to-3 target that we currently have, Finlay, is about the number of devices available in school. So any child or young person bringing their own device into school will be on top of that ratio. So it will be additional to that ratio. So if they can bring a device and can use that, that's fantastic. But if they can't, that we are aiming to get that level of devices into all of our schools, as well as what you can bring from home.
Okay, Susan. So can we move to the recommendation? Can we note 2.1, the further progress to date on bandwidth updates? 2.2, the progress with mobile learning network rollout? 2.3, the current number of devices in schools, bearing in mind what was raised with regard to devices being provided by external bodies. And 2.4, agreed that reporting on digital infrastructure and curriculum now moves to be a 6-monthly at this committee. Given that we're about to go into the elections, so we'll have a new council, then we have a recess. I guess probably the next committee may well be the around about the September committee anyway. So are we happy to do that in principle? Yep. Okay, so we move to item 14 on page 289. Early Learning and Childcare Interim Sustainable Rate. This report provides members an update on the flexible framework for early learning and childcare. The report also provides members with an update on key findings from the Scottish Government publications Financial Sustainability Health Check of the Childcare Sector and the overview of the local authority funding and support for early learning and childcare providers. The report seeks members' agreement on the implementation of an interim rate from 1st of January 2022, an increase to the rate paid to funded providers to provide a meal for children. It also seeks agreement to receive a further paper on setting sustainable rates for providers that takes cognizance of updated guidance expected from Scottish Government. And we have Rosemary Smith. Rosie, is there anything you want to add to the your paper?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I do have a couple of updates. So, the paper, we've accepted a further childminder onto the early learning and childcare framework. So that childminder will be delivering for us in the Annan area. So that adds extra flexibility to families in that area. And the Ipsos Mori cost collection survey has now been extended to the 28th of March, giving providers a further week to respond. So far, locally in Dumfries and Galloway, 19 out of the 37 providers have responded to that survey, and we're continuing to encourage all providers to respond, because the higher the rate of response, the better the data will be in helping us to inform the setting of a sustainable rate going forward. Both Susan and I have attended very recently a Scottish Government workshop on setting sustainable rates, and we're also awaiting the further updated guidance and the publication of the Ipsos Mori report, which is due at the end of April. So Susan and I are happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Rosie. Members? Karen?
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking at the lunches, so I am, and at 3.5.15, it's actually stating that we're going to agree to increase it. So we've been getting £3 per child per meal from the Scottish Government, but we've been paying our providers to date £1.77. So I'd like to know where the difference of £1.23 has gone. How's that been used? And my second question to that is, why is the proposal to backdate to January this year and not backdating it to August last year, the beginning of the academic year? Thanks.
Rosie?
I'm going to pass over to Susan to answer these.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, members. Thank you, Councillor Crothers. So the first point to say is that our bid to Scottish Government under the 1140 included a cost for meals at £1.77, and that's part of the bid. We do not receive £3 per meal from government. The funding is not segregated in that way. It is simply a pot of funding that comes down in order to cover the costs. Now, the £1.77 was part of the original bid for meals, but then also confirmed at the time of the independent financial review. And so that's why the rate was £1.77. We recognise, however, that other local authorities are pretty consistently, not all of them, but almost all authorities are paying at £3 per, sorry, not hour, I've been talking hours, but £3 per meal. And therefore we believe that we should be doing the same. We're very aware of the cost of food, and despite the outcomes of the independent financial review, we feel we would ask members to support us in moving to the £3 payment at this time. And the reason that we're suggesting a backdate to January is that this application of the Consumer Price Index is normally from April every year, and it's April every year relating to the Consumer Price Index from the previous November. But given that that had gone up quite substantially from what it had been in under 1% to 5.4%, we felt that that should be backdated to January in order to support providers in acknowledgement that the prices and the cost of things have gone up now rather than waiting till April. So the backdating is bringing back an additional payment that would normally happen in April.
Thanks, Chair. So we don't receive £3 per meal from the Scottish Government. We made a bid for £1.77, but we've decided now to pay £3.
The funding that comes down from government comes down in one lump sum. So there's not a separate meals rate within that.
Okay, so where's I suppose that's going to cost us more in that case. How's that being taken out of the budget? Where's, obviously there's more going into the meals, so less going in somewhere else.
Yeah. So we've spent a bit of time in the last few months. I've worked closely with Rosie and her team to understand the level of uptake at the moment and the level of uptake that we anticipate, because we need to budget for that full uptake, and understand the budget available to us that's expected in the coming years. And we believe that this is sustainable and that this is affordable from within that budget as things stand at the moment. So we're comfortable that it can be paid. Whether it should have been paid before is a different conversation, because that, as I understand it, that was part of that recommendation from that independent financial review.
Yeah, I know the Scottish Government, when this was being introduced, were reluctant to bring in a national rate for the 1140 hours, and presume that included a national rate of charge for the meal as well. Okay, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. I thought it would have been a list of people to speak on this by now, but so I do think what Karen's outlined in as far as looking to go further back to the start of the academic year is a fair proposal. We'll maybe come back to that at some point. Last time we looked at this with a good debate, and I felt we came to the right decision, which was a few years ago now, but ABC Nursery, Ecclefechan, went out of business at that point. think we're at a similar point in time now where Treasure Island's decided to throw the towel in over at Castle Douglas, so they're under real pressures. And I think we're all getting lobbied for the PVI sector in particular in regards to the pressures they're under. And I suppose the question is 4.94% an adequate enough lift in this term, and is back to January of this year long enough to give them the funds that they need to go forward? That, I suppose that will be discussed further. Susan, for the sake of, we've had previous conversations, so I can try and get my head around about this, get a clear understanding what the money is. So we had a letter on 21st of December for the Minister for Children and Young People. That refers to £1 billion across Scotland being spent on. It does say ELC. We're aware of that. We could maybe discuss that. So 2.44% is our allocation to Fleece and Galloway. We've had a breakdown of that. It comes to just short of 29 million. I think it is 28 million odd. But we've been told specifically in ELC itself, delivered 1140 hours. It's just over 15.5 million to spend. So I think we have to, looking at that, the question that still lies within myself, we've got a proportion of the service is delivered in-house by the council, a proportion of the service is delivered externally by the PVI sector. What is that proportion? I think it used to be about 43% PVI, 57, I think it was somewhere about there. But that's a changing piece from the council ourselves. But in regards to even just let's stick to the 15.544 million at the moment, which is directly correlates with the delivered 1140 hours, which is what I'm talking about here specifically. What's the proportion what the council spends on itself to how much do we spend as a local authority delivering that service compared to the how much we spend through the PVI sector? That's my fundamental question at this moment in time. I do think we're at a moment in time, going back to the previous time we looked at this and we made the right decision then, but I think we have to consider seriously, once we get the answers to the questions that have been put, right, how much do we spend on ourselves delivering this service? Is it more appropriate to be putting a further allocation to the PVI sector? We're not at that point to make that foolish decision today by any point, but we should be reflecting back to recommendation 2.4 and 2.5 and 2.6, I think it is in particular, Chair. But that one, so I'm trying to understand, Susan, so I'm absolutely clear. How much do we spend really delivering a service through the council's delivery service? How much do we spend proportionately in relation to the PVI sector? I need to understand what that spend is.
Yeah,
Susan?
Thank you, Chair. So of that 15.5 million, I can give members today a bit of a breakdown in terms of how that's arrived at. So currently we have just over 9 million, which goes to council establishments. We've got around about £1 million that is around the central inclusion, the central staff costs. So that's in relation to the quality assurance, the administration and the training budgets that sit, and they work across both parts of the service. So they work across the local authority establishments, but also the private sector. And then we've got 5.3 million that goes directly to partner providers, which makes up roughly the 15.5 million. So that in broad terms is round about, and I am rounding here, so please bear with me, it's round about 2/3 to 1/3. And that would seem to be approximately right based on the numbers. The numbers are slightly higher than that. And Rosie would probably be able to cover the numbers off in terms of the percentage in each sector. I think it's slightly more than that, but the actual share of the funding is fairly similar broadly speaking, to those numbers. And I think that's part of, if I can just go on to the workshop that Rosie referred to, that she and I have attended nationally, I think that that's broadly a picture that seems to be replicated across Scotland, and seems to be that our processes and methodology is very similar to other authorities in Scotland. So the publication of the national guidance on the process for setting a sustainable rate will become really important to us in terms of looking at which parts of our methodology do we need to revisit and do we need to consider differently, perhaps, in order to make sure that that share of the funding is fairly distributed wherever the children are. And we certainly would see that as part of the next piece of work. So I think that's what you're referring to, Councillor Carruthers, in terms of the recommendation to bring back a further report once we have that information to work from and the data from the Ipsos Mori poll.
Ian?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that, Susan. So,
Councillor Carruthers,
go on, sorry. Yep.
I could just add that the local authority delivers 62% of provision currently, and the private voluntary sector and childminders deliver 38% of provision.
Thanks for that, Rosie. Thank you, Chair. No, that's the very point. So I suppose that's part of my argument. So I'm looking at it for 38%, but you're saying it's 38% is being delivered by PVI sector, but they receive approximately 33% of the funding, which I've heard it's near 23%, but I'm not going to argue that point today. We'll come back to a different time, I suppose, with a future report. But I think there's a strong argument to come back and say, listen, OK, let's take this back, 2.5 and 2.6, let's take it back to the start of the academic year, Chair. That's what I would look to try and get support from across the committee today.
If it's okay, I'd just like to add that the council also delivers provision in really rural areas. So, for example, in some of our very outlying nurseries where we have very few children, the cost per head is very high there. And we have to put always have to put a minimum of 2 staff in, whatever the number of children attending.
And the issue with regard to the backdating?
Sorry, Chair.
The issue about backdating to January versus backdating to August, beginning of the academic year.
Okay, so while we've been speaking, I've been doing some very basic calculations, and if we backdate to August, that is in essence backdating the CPI, so the Consumer Price Index, the cost of inflation, beyond the date of the inflation number that we have used. But in broad terms, because that was the November inflation rate that has been used in this report. So if we go back to August, that obviously predates that and would need to be considered. But in broad terms, I'm working on the premise that it's 4 months of the 12 that's costed in the report. In broad terms, that would be round about £154,000 additional to what has been set out in the report already. And that would be obviously a decision for members to take.
But is that affordable within the current budget?
Yes, I believe we can afford that. And that's based on, sorry, Chair, I should say, I believe we can afford that based on the projections for the spend and the outturn position at the end of this financial year. I believe that we can afford that.
And would that be a safe decision?
Would that be
a safe decision to make?
I think if we want to, perhaps I'm not sure. I need to take your advice, Chair, or perhaps if Gillian's on the call. But it's for me, it would be a case of going back to the numbers. I think because we would need to look at what the inflation rate was in August. I think. And look at applying that forward rather than a rate from November backward, because we know that the current financial climate in the country and the cost of living crisis is maybe wasn't as severe as it is now back in August.
Director.
Thank you very much. That was the point I was going to make, Susan, and that being a safe decision, clearly it's whether we have your direction to move in that way, and we would, but I would recommend that we don't go beyond the Consumer Price Index date with a different number. I think it keeps us all, the rationale is clear if we use the Consumer Price Index from November and use the August to November Consumer Price Index for any increase for that period. I think there would be a clearer rationale on that basis. And I highlight the point that Susan makes, that whether we can afford it is premised on projections of uptake. And therefore it's not a retrospective, it's not an absolute, but it would be a judgment. And with Susan and Rosie's good judgment, I I would trust that they would know that the budget could tolerate that, but I would recommend that we stick to the Consumer Price Index increase timeline.
So just to get this straight, we're talking about backdating to January or backdating to August?
Absolutely. So apologies to that, to the wider public in particular who can't hear. But I suppose my argument is, so my understanding of what the director's saying there is we'll go back to November, where it was clearly stated then it's 4.94%, and the previous 2 months to that, leading back to the end of August when the academic year started, we would use that CPI. But what I'm saying is inflation's running, I think, near 6% now, is my understanding. I'm happy to go at 4.94% right back to that point in time, even if it was subject to final ratification by the next council. But I think it's fair, so any potential budget issues or ever can be dealt with them after that. But I think it's to put it forward clear from now, because ultimately they can do that anyways as we go forward. But I think to give reassurance to the PVI sector in particular about the level of funding they've potentially got, whether it's this council or the next, I think what we really is setting the scene for them to say, right, okay, you can put your business plan together going forward safely.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair. I welcome the flexibility that you offer in terms of subject to ratification, because I think that just helps us all with our due diligence and any points that we have to look at contractually, because clearly here we have their tender documentation, and if there are anything, I would welcome an opportunity just to check with our finance colleagues that we're doing the right thing. I think we all have the right intent here, but we would want to make sure we were safe in so doing. The other point I would like to stress is that if only 19 of our providers have entered the Ipsos Mori survey, is to have their voices heard and to help us in this in establishing a national rate. It surprises me that we have such a limited uptake in that survey. So I would urge our local providers to engage in that process so that we can have the most robust national information to guide the rate going forward. Thank you.
But just for absolute clarification, what we're saying is in 2.6, we agree an increase of the rate backdated to to August rather than to the 1st of January. Yeah. Tracy?
Chair, could I suggest that we perhaps leave in backdated to January? However, if once ratification of the budget is confirmed, the budget allows for this, it'll be backdated to August. So that we've got the January in there, but we've got the option that if once the background work's done, it can be backdated to August with the inflation rates that Gillian's mentioned being used.
Yeah, I think that would be a safer move. Ian?
No, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I would stick to my guns on this one, and the reason being that subject to final ratification for the next council, the academic year doesn't start till August this year. New election, well, the election is in May, there'll be a new council formed. There's lots of time between then. And if the after due diligence, we do a financial assessment that it doesn't stack up, then obviously that would change. It'd be subject to that final ratification. So if there's any points, I think what Tracy's picking up on quite correctly, that this doesn't actually stack up. We haven't got the budget suffice to that'll come up in that report when it comes back to whether it's this committee, full council, even a cabinet for that matter. They would make that decision at that point.
Julie?
Thank you. I think Tracy's advice is that we, by keeping the January date in, that allows us to make that backdated payment should there be any dubiety regarding that. So it would be a definitive on the January payment, which we would then seek agreement for, and then anything in addition to that. So it gives us all that security, including the PVI sector, that we're not going to enter into any dubiety over the January payment at the very least.
Yeah, I think it does make it safe for the PVI, so at least they are guaranteed a payment, and it's dependent upon, or it varies depending on whether it's backdated to January or to August, but at least they get the payment. And we don't need to overemphasise how difficult things are, not only in terms of the PVI section, but generally in terms of the cost of living crisis which we're facing. So, Elaine?
I was going to put my hand up maybe to make the point that subsequently made by Gillian, is that Tracy's advice allows us to make a payment to the PVI sector now. And that's the payment backdated to the 1st of January, and then there could be another payment once we've done the calculations on what is affordable. So I would go with Tracy's Tonko's advice on this one, because I think that actually allows money to go out the door to the PVI sector. I mean, Ian's suggestion means that they wouldn't get the money until sometime in the new council, when the new council had taken that decision. So I'd certainly go for the advice that Tracy has given us, which is actually to keep it into the 1st of January and then do the calculations to see what else can be given thereafter by the new council.
Okay, you're pretty happy with that, Ian?
Yep, no, very. If it allows the money to flow, I think it's the absolute right decision to make.
David?
How many PVIs didn't respond to the questionnaire? Would it be worthwhile writing out to them again and asking them for their views?
16 didn't respond? Yeah. Is that right, Susan?
19 out of 37 responded. So that 18 haven't responded so far. They have had they've had all the FAQs, they've had the presentation that was shared with myself as soon as I got it. They've had 2 reminders, and one was sent out this week, so they're aware that as of this week, 19 of them had responded, and I have encouraged them on each occasion when I've shared information that it's in their interest to respond. I also understand that the national bodies, the NDNA, Early Years Scotland and CALA, were also consulted on the survey, so I would hope that their national bodies are also supporting them and encouraging them to respond to that.
That's fine, thanks very much.
Thanks,
I'll
Rosie.
withdraw that statement.
Okay, so I've got John Young wishing to speak. John?
Thanks, Chair. That was a very interesting discussion. Yes, as you said, Chair, things are very difficult in the private sector. And Susan will know we've got a nursery, a very well-regarded nursery in Castle Douglas closing in July. Now, 70 youngsters presently attend that nursery. As far as I'm aware, there's very little capacity elsewhere in the town. Could someone outline what will happen if there's no suitable placements for the present youngsters who attend that nursery? Is it a case of what, Susan? What will happen?
I think I can respond to that, Councillor Young. So my understanding is that 30 families who were eligible for early learning and childcare, that's the funded side of the business, would be affected by the closure of Treasure Island Nursery at the end of July, and would need to secure a place for the next academic year. And as of today, there are 3 families now outstanding that are still needing to find places for next year. So we've managed to work with families to find an alternative provision going forward. We're continuing to work with those outstanding families to find out what the need is for them so that we can offer them alternative provision. A number of them have moved to Castle Douglas Nursery in the town. There's also another provider in the town that offers all year round provision. So there's possibilities there as well. We do know that the owner of Treasure Island Nursery, the nursery that's due to close, operates another private nursery in Kirkcudbright. We do know that the operating model there is due to change, which might also impact on the hours that children are taking at the school, but we're working through that at the moment. But to my knowledge, to the best of my knowledge today, there are 3 children still to be placed from Treasure Island for their funded early learning and childcare needs.
Okay, John?
Thanks, Susan. Could I ask that ward members are kept updated with progress in finding spaces for these 3 outstanding families? Much appreciated. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I've got Katie wanting to speak. Katie?
Thank you. Yes, so I'm looking at the paper. We've got 4 recommendations to note, and then we're being asked to agree 2.5, 6 and 7. Now, I'm looking at 2.5 and 2.6, and it is reference to the finances and budgets, etc., but there's not any appendix with the budget details. And while I think it's really useful, Susan, that you've been able to sort of advise us of approximately what the breakdown of spend is, 5.3 million going to partner providers, for example. As a member making decisions, I need to see that detail in black and white, and I'm a bit concerned that we don't have that detail in front of us. There's narrative there, but within a table format. So I appreciate what's being said about the whole backdating further than January and whether we can afford it or not. But without the data, without the information before us, I don't feel that it would be a competent decision for members to be making additional pressures on this department without actually getting that assurance in writing. So I guess my question is, would it even be competent for us to make any further recommendations of backdating to August? Again, I'm just trying to get the clarity on the detail here. So in terms of looking at the increase of funding for meals in 2.6, it references paragraph 3.5.13 to 0.15. But I'm not sure. If you could clarify for me, I think it would be really helpful, because 3.5.14 makes reference to 118k funding, but is that to increase? Because it's not mentioned the increase to £3. On the following paragraph, it then goes to say that we're looking to increase to £3, but doesn't reference an amount. So is that 118k to increase it to £3, or what is that made up of? Because I'm really struggling, Chair, to actually see the clarity on this report, because there's a lot of narrative, there's a lot of different figures, but it doesn't all correlate in a logical manner. So I guess if I could just have clarity, how much additional money does it cost to increase to £3? Where's the budget line in that? Because I think it is important that we don't over-promise what we don't have funding for. Thank you.
Susan, Rosie?
Yeah. Have I put my mic off? Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Hagman. So the 118,000 is absolutely, it's about £3 per meal, and based on that number of children and assuming that they are in 5 days a week. Now, we know that that's not necessarily the case, but for the purposes of the workings, if their pattern were to change, we needed to be sure that we could afford that. So therefore, we've made the assumption that every child is in 5 days a week, and that is the maximum head count, scaled up at the £3 per day cost for the meal, and that is the total cost, the 118,000. That's the additional cost over and above what we're currently paying, and that is affordable from within the budget, and I can provide that assurance to members. I apologise that it's always with hindsight, a table in the report may have made it much simpler to follow, so I apologise for that, and I'll take that on board for future reports.
Okay. Katie?
Thanks, Susan. I appreciate it's not a simple position, and obviously you have given us that reassurance. We have got in our papers, the governance assurance on point 4, which confirms that all this has been ratified. So even if it's not in there, we do have that governance assurance. We don't have the governance assurance though in backdating it further than January. So I think that is important to clarify. And we're agreeing hopefully on 2.7 to receive a further paper. I guess my question is, can we ensure that we get the full financial breakdown in future? But that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So no one is indicating they wish to speak. So can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, right, and then 2.5, agree the implementation of increment rate backdated to the 1st of January 2022 as set out in paragraphs 3.59 to 12. So we can do that, can't we? So that ensures we actually make a payout to the PVI sector. Okay, so we can agree that one. And we can agree 2.6, the increase in the funding for the meal. We can agree 2.7, so it's merely a question of what the wording for the agreeing the any further
Chair,
backdating.
Is it a 2.8? Is it a recommendation 2.8, just outlining what we spoke about earlier in regards to it'll be contained within a further report, but in principle we're agreeing 4.8 or CPI back between January and the end of August, the academic year.
Yep. Okay. So is everybody clear?
Sorry, Chair, I would just add it on to the end of 2.5 and 2.6, just so it stays within those two sections. So at the end of each one, we would add on, however, you know, subject to the officers doing the background work, there's the option to backdate this to August.
No, I think the two are separate. What we're doing is we're agreeing the backdating to the 1st of January, so that payment will definitely be made. Okay, and then there's another where we actually look to, if it's affordable, backdate to the to August. So we guarantee backdate to the 1st of January. So Susan and Rosie, you're content with that?
Thank you, Chair. We will instruct those payments this afternoon, actually, in order to try and get them out for the end of term, along with the adjustment payment to providers, so they should be with them very quickly.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be most appreciated. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan and Rosie.
Chair, apologise. Was that a recommendation 2.8? Yes. Yep. Thank you. Thanks very much for that clarity.
Okay, so moving on to the item 15, class size organisations, is page 355. This report updates members on the decision of full council in the budget setting for 2022-23 and asks they agree to class sizes and staff information as detailed in the report. Are we all content with that? Okay. So can we agree the recommendations? Agreed. I've no further business. This is obviously the last meeting of this committee before the elections to the council. I personally will be standing down on May the 5th or May the 6th, whatever it is. So it's been a privilege to chair this committee in its various guises for almost 9 years now. I must say it's been a privilege to work with the staff, not only the central support team, but the staff in the schools, the pupils and the parents. And just recognising, I hope education is in a better way than it was 9 years ago, but you can't guarantee it. But the sheer resilience which the schools have shown over the last 2 years of this pandemic has been absolutely amazing. And, you know, congratulations to all those involved in still continuing to deliver good, high-quality education. So thank you.
Totally agree with that, Chair.